you're able to gather questions that we will be answering. So without further ado, and for the purpose of time, let's hit the road. Our first question is, to our dear panelists, I would recommend that in case that you have ideas to help out other panelists, you may do so. Okay.
Okay.
First question: what are the best practices in recruitment during this pandemic? Ako na agad. All right. What the best practices in recruitment during this pandemic? We've all adapted to doing our recruitment online. Most of the companies have shifted or pivoted to the use of the different
First
online
question, what
platforms.
are the best practices in recruitment during this pandemic? Ako na agad. Alright, what the best practices in recruitment during this pandemic? We've all adapted to doing our recruitment online.
Ishi?
Most of the companies have
Habang
shifted
recording.
of the different. First question, what are the best practices in recruitment during this
Ish?
pandemic?
I think we are having
Some technical difficulties.
technical difficulties. We are apologizing for that. Okay. Can everyone? I hope everyone can hear me. My dear panelists, am I clear to everyone?
You're clear here.
Okay.
Yes, Mark.
So okay, I was able to read the question on what the best practice in recruitment during this pandemic. So as I've said, most of the companies have shifted to using online platforms. The use of well, kahit naman before the pandemic, some of the companies are already using Facebook and different social media in luring candidates. So mas mataas na lang ang paggamit nito nowadays. And then to promote social distancing, the use of interview via online, no, ito na rin yung ginagawa. But again, to some companies, especially the multinational companies, and I hope your companies as well, kahit before the pandemic, I assume that you've been trying to use these platforms, it's online platforms to conduct your recruitment your recruitment practice. So does other panelists would like to jump and maybe add more to this question before we move?
Yeah.
If none, then we can move to the next question. Okay, advantages and disadvantages on online testing. Well, the online testing, it depends on what kind of test that are you going to use and what position or for what position. May mga positions kasi that kami sa company, what we use the online testing is for the personality tests. Assessment, basic assessments lang muna. Because when it comes to their functions, functional competencies, we always arrange a physical test. Ang negosyo kasi ng South Pacific is LPG. So we import and store LPG and distribute this to different retailers. So yung mga positions sa different terminals, these are highly skilled and highly technical functions. So online testings will be used for preliminary assessments, and then once we need them for the functional test, functional competencies test, then we really have to invite them to come over. Of course, we practice social distancing still. Actually, we've been using this kind of testing even prior to COVID pandemic. So maybe the online testing disadvantage probably would be the availability of number one, internet connection of the candidate. And then yun yung nakikita kong disadvantage, yung technical yung infrastructure, internet infrastructure ng candidate could be the disadvantage of the online testing. But the advantage of it, you can minimize labor in facilitating the test. You will be able to manage cutting trees or papers. So yun yung mga maganda doon sa online testing. And you can also immediately get the results, especially if you have a tool talaga being used to conduct your test. You can easily get the results and inform the candidate accordingly. So that's question number 2, the advantages and disadvantages of online testing. I hope I was able to answer the question well. So anyone from the panelists who would like to give inputs? We're good? Okay, so we move to the next for labor relations. Okay, Attorney Linus, can we terminate employees if they refuse to go to work due to fear of contracting COVID in the workplace? It's a good question.
Yes, and the answer is no. We cannot terminate them. We can offer them in the alternative work from home arrangements or other flexible work arrangements. But if that's not possible, it would be in a no work no pay situation. However, during the absence of that employee or employees, the management can always recruit or hire temporary employees during a 6-month period. Was that clear?
Question under labor relations is, prior to community quarantine, administrative hearing was scheduled. Unfortunately, hearing was canceled due to the quarantine. Our main office is operating since June through Metro Manila, and they're still in ECQ. But actually now we're in DCQ. When is the best time to proceed with the canceled hearing?
Okay, first we have to clarify that if a hearing is required by company policy, then the best time is when there's no longer travel restrictions, or if the employer can provide a transportation for the employee to attend the physical hearing. Well, another suggestion is that do the hearings online.
Yun. I was about to ask that question.
Yes, and actually, if it's the hearing is not required, not all administrative hearings require the physical presence of the employee. What is required is the opportunity of the employee to respond to the charges against him. He can answer that through SMS or text or via email, or he can send his handwritten answers via courier.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone from the panelists would like to share their inputs on about the labor relations question, or we can proceed? We can proceed then. Okay. Thank you, Attorney Linus. Okay. This is for Ms. Marisa, compensation and benefits. Can we differ statutory benefits for startup company until profits normalize in this time of pandemic? Maganda yung tanong. Ms. Marisa.
Okay. I was thinking about it. This is typically a problem of most companies because they don't have, they don't even have funds probably for payroll. So what
Mhm.
more, the benefits. So the tendency is unahin mo na yung payroll and then say, tsaka na tayo magbayad ng pag-ibig, ng especially SSS, which is quite a huge amount.
Mm-mm.
The thing there is these agencies have already provided some level of relief in terms of payment. Diba? They said during the quarantine period, okay lang, no penalty. However, parang starting June, you already have to pay because the assumption is when we were in GCQ, companies were operating already.
Yeah.
And but the problem is like if you don't have money because as I said I do consulting for several companies, so they don't have money to pay for SSS. In fact, their payroll was tingi-tingi. They had to do it 25%, 25%, ganyan, no? So talagang naiwan na itong mga to. The problem with that is this is the time when employees would like to avail of the services or of the calamity loans, yung mga ganyan, of
Mm-mm.
these agencies. So sayang. And then they apply only to find out that they have not paid. So that's really the problem. So we have the thing to do there is coordinate with your finance people and say, hey, you need to prioritize this because in the first place, you have already deducted the employee's contribution from the payroll that you submitted. Okay?
Mhm.
In the worst situation, I've heard also of some companies that that have decided to make their representation, meaning they go to SSS, they talk to the people there, parang special representation, and then making arrangement as of how to pay it partially or pwede ba we will pay for June, yung March, April, May, ganito muna so that our employees can avail of the loan, something like that. No, that can be. I think that can be done.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful answer, Ms. Marisa. We have a second question po para sa inyo ulit. For employees who will undergo retrenchment, what compensation and benefits can employees expect or demand?
Okay, I think the word there cannot be demand. No, it's not demand, but probably expect or
Mm-mm.
expectation should be what does the law provide. So
Yeah.
the labor code under 298 and 299 spelled out provisions for separation. First one
Mhm.
is this is where most of the companies fall, especially during this pandemic. It is 1/2 month per year of service with a fraction of at least 6 months considered as 1 year. And this is really for retrenchment to prevent losses
Yeah.
or closure or cessation of the operation due to financial loss. And then, of course, the third one is employees suffering from incurable disease within the 6-month period. The fourth one has something to do with security. But relative to the pandemic, so this is really the A or the B, diba? And therefore, we can give, the law provides that we give 1/2 month per year of service. The second part of separation is really for installation of labor-saving devices. Ito yung 1 month period of service and it's bigger than the 1/2 month kasi with the installation of labor-saving devices, the concept there is nakatipid ka naman, di ba? And therefore, you
Correct.
can pay more for the employees. Some notes on retrenchment. You cannot pay less than 1 month. Parang the provision is 1.5 month for the service but not less than 1 month. So at the minimum, an employee will get 1 month. Second is there's the notice of termination. So attorney, you can help me, because I'm talking legally now. Notice of termination, you have to inform DOLE 1 month before the time that you want to implement that. And for the employees, there has to be a 1 month notice to the employees. So some key points also relative to the package. One is that it should be based on the latest salary. And then second is the inclusion of regular allowances in the computation of the benefit. And it is exempted from income tax.
Mm-mm.
So in addition to that legal aspect, so what are the things that we can do? Before kasi, di ba, uso yung parang special separation program. Di ba, where companies would give 2 months per year of service, ganyan, 2.5 months, or more than what the law provides. Why is this so? During that time, kasi they want to encourage employees to avail of that program. So sometimes there is that expectation of the employees, bakit half month lang kami? Bakit dati, we did this and, we paid more than that. So we just have to go back to what the law provides. Unless you have a lot of money, then you can say maybe you can add this and that. But in the light of the condition now, I think this is not the time to be very generous. So another input that I would like to share, maybe things that we can do here. So since employees will be getting a separation package, then the question is, what will they do out of it? Baka mamaya, gastusin lang, tapos wala na silang kikitayan, di ba? So when we did this in the past, in my previous companies, we would do livelihood programs, parang livelihood training. Parang we train them how to manage their, having skills, di ba, to start up a business, or getting all of these financial advisors to help them also where to put their money. I mean, things like that you can do for your employees. Another thought that I'd like to share is maybe the health is a problem. Maybe you can add on, continuing their HMO till December. So kunyari, ang HMO nyo will expire in December. So, and then you're implementing this in July. So, syempre, di ba, advance payment naman tayo sa HMO. Maybe we can just let them avail of it till end of December. Okay, that's my inputs. Attorney,
Thank you, Ms.
unless you want to add something.
Attorney Linus, baka mayroon kang gusto idagdag. Sir, nakamute ka po.
Okay. Is it clear now?
Yes.
Okay. Mama Marisa already mentioned it all, and I completely agree with her. Like to highlight only that we should also be compassionate and humane in this trying times. So the suggestion of continuing with the HMO benefits and not deducting it from their total or last salary would be really helpful to them.
Yeah.
I'd like to ako yung sharer, ako din yung may follow-up question.
Go ahead.
Sometimes kasi the package is quite big, di ba? And especially for companies that have not set up a retirement program, meaning you have your money being invested and you have that pool of money that is ready anytime that you do this. Is there a problem doing it tingi? Tingi, meaning 50% muna ngayon or 25% every month. We will do it partial. Is that okay legally?
Yes, actually, many companies are already practicing it. as long as the employee will agree. Of course, usually the employee understands the situation. That's why they tend to agree with that arrangement.
So we will have to ask them to sign a document saying that they agree. Parang disclaimer.
Yes, to
Okay.
document it.
Okay. So thank you, Ms. Marisa, and thank you for the additional inputs, Attorney Linus. We can now proceed to the next set of questions. For learning and development, what are the training or activities on innovation in times of pandemic? Ms. Lynn, VP Lynn, paano daw po ang magandang training or activities on innovation? Ms. Lynn, you're on mute.
There's a second question, Mark, that's also related to this. Can we flash both
Sige.
questions? Because the answer is tied up. You're
Okay.
right. Okay. So, yeah, as we know, during this pandemic, training is a challenge to deliver because we need to be very innovative and we need to make it interactive in spite of using only online methodologies. So let me share with you a few guidelines on how we can make the training innovative as well as interactive. Jeff, could you flash the slide on screen? All right. Okay, there are 4 principles that I could share para maging innovative, no, our approaches right now. We need to understand yung context of the people who are undergoing training. Most everyone is on work from home. And when we know, when people are on work from home, there are also many distractions that happen in the environment. Unlike before, we used to conduct training in the office. You pull out people and you put them on a classroom or a conference room. We actually ask people sometimes to proceed to another venue. We rent venues, hindi ba? Minsan para walang mga distraction. But right now, since people are on work from home, the first thing we need to understand is maraming distractions sa environment. One of the things we can do is to put in learning time blocks. For example, we could designate a day, a specific day and time of the week so that people can expect na pag itong araw na to, pag nag-schedule ng training tayo, palagi, let's say every Tuesday or every Friday, as much as possible, HR can control those scheduling. It helps to put the mindset of the people on a learning time sila on that particular date and time. Second, most companies right now nasa e-learning. And I understand kung maliliit kayong company or not so progressive yet, you might say yung e-learning baka pang malalaking corporates lang yan. Actually, I'd like to share that, even small companies can do e-learning and you can sustain it. You don't need a fancy platform. Of course, the large companies would have platforms for e-learning. But there are free platforms actually that you can avail of. One is Moodle. Even if it's a small company, if you have many employees, let's say you have 100 employees that you need to reach, you can research Moodle, that's spelled Moodle, is a freeware that can be used. Now, for example, you don't have an IT person that can help you do a platform. You can put that learning on webinar format like what we're doing now. You could have small sessions, 1 hour sessions, 2 hour sessions. That's what I call bite-sized micro-learning. Even 30-minute sessions are good. You can make your own PowerPoint of the learning material. I'm flashing on screen yung Business English Improvement Series. I'm sharing this. Ganito yung ginawa namin sa FENMA. We discovered that during this pandemic, most of the communication that happened are through email, sometimes Viber chat, mostly written communication. And if you have salespeople, accounting people, employees who are more accustomed to interacting verbally through meetings, they had to adjust to using written modes of communication. And you still want to project a professional tone in your email. So we came up with a Business English Improvement Series. These are short 30-minute review sessions on grammar, tenses, use of punctuation marks. so that our people still come across professional. And this becomes part of the e-learning series. Kung meron na kayong mga na-prepare, for example, the mga PowerPoint decks, you can email it to your employees, share it via Zoom or WebEx, and then you conduct a session, right? And then now, to make it interactive, to make it engaging, you blend it with the interaction. So what they do, before they go to the session, magbabasa muna sila ng e-course, sasagutin nila yan online kung may mga questions. Tapos pag interactive method na, yun na yung online, then people can still share and you're still practicing safe distancing, but you can interact and ask questions with the facilitator and it becomes more engaging. Fourth principle, keep it short. It's so difficult for people now to sit in a long session and they have many other things to do. They need to cope with the home environment distraction. So I would recommend a maximum of 1 hour session to keep learning bite-sized, and we call it micro-learning. On the next slide, this is how we showed a sample of designating the training day. I'd like to share with you what we did with FENMA is we designated Tuesdays as the time when we give announcements on upcoming trainings, or that's when we conduct the training. And we created a hashtag. You know, young people nowadays, they love hashtags. So our hashtag is Learn Anywhere with Training Tuesdays. And we related it to staying mentally fit and sharp. So every Tuesday, people's mindset are being conditioned. I'm going to get an announcement today for a scheduled upcoming training, or today there will be a session, a learning session, and it helps people become more receptive, more ready to learn for that particular task. The other panelists might have something to share as well on this topic. If not, we can move on to the next question. Or did I hear somebody want to share something?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Actually, maganda yung best practice talaga ng FINMA, especially the comms. Since everybody is using online and online learning platforms, different online learning platforms, we really have to start with the basics. The comms is very important. Miss Lynn, open ba yan sa to everyone or for FINMA employees lang?
Well, our platform uses Moodle as well as
Okay.
G Suite, which is exclusive to the FINMA employees.
Okay.
But you know what? I can always share the material. This is a time when we need to be open to sharing.
Yes.
Lalong-lalo na, there are training vendors who market their training programs, but all of us are budget challenged. Whether small
Yes.
company, medium-sized company, even the large companies, even the multinationals are challenged with their budget. So, like kaya tayo nagpo-project share, di ba? So,
Correct.
write me a note or send a request to the PMAP office, and I'm happy to share the material.
So there you go, guys. Those who are interested and would like to partner with VP Lean, you may email PMAP. Okay. Thank you for that, VP Lean. For OD or Organizational Development, kay Miss Beth Nasol, we have 2 questions also. As HR in a small company, how do I introduce OD to our team? I think second question also could be shared. Yan, kasi magka-relate din siya. How to reform organization culture.
Okay. So
Miss
can you
Beth?
hear me well?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. You know, a lot of, you know, one of the functional HR that is so versatile is really OD, because the OD really looks into, well, organizational efficiency. And when you talk about organizational efficiency, it really encompassed all the functionalities of HR. You start off with, if you're a small company, it's really looking at creating your organizational design. So what kind of organization will best suit and support your business? And you can start OD with that. And a simple framework would be, what are your current realities today? Of course, you have to have a first you have to have a vision in mind, no? And then you see if this is my vision or this is my goal for my company, and this is where I want to bring my organization. What are my current realities? So you make an assessment of who you are, what you are, you know, what kind of what people do you have, what processes do you have, what strategies that you have, and after which you look into where you want to be. And then if there's a difference, that's what you call the gap, and that's where you focus on. So organizational design to support your future business is where you can introduce OD. You can also introduce OD with reference to once you've designed your org is really in terms of process, no? Finding out whether do you have the correct process, no? There's a model that unfortunately, I don't have the materials, but I can actually describe to you one framework, which is the simplest framework, OD framework that I use is the J. Galbraith model, no? And it talks about 5 areas in an organization. So first you start off with what are your structure? What is the structure that you want? Well, first is the strategy that you want. You look into your strategy, your structure, the kind of people that you want, the rewards that you want, and then the culture that you want. No? So those are the 5 areas that you can look into so that a small company can actually introduce the concept of OD. Now, how do you now reform organizational culture? I think culture um, will actually rely on what your strategy is. No? So if your strategy is really to go, let's say, agile, your culture should really support agile, right? So it's the strategy that dictates the culture. So it's where you want to bring your business. And once you know how to bring the business, then you can shape the minds and hearts of your employees into achieving um, where you want to go. You know? So that's how you reform an org culture. But the old culture is actually led by whoever is your mancom or your leaders. No? It's driven by your leaders. So normally the leaders will come together and they will actually define the kind of culture that you want to happen. And why the leaders? Because the leaders are the ones strategizing for the business. No? So once they have come up with an agreement, then you now develop the structure, the change management plan that you will need for the kind of culture that you want in an organization. And this is where HR comes in because HR will definitely provide the data, you know, to define the kind of culture that the organization would want or what kind of practices or behaviors that you want prevalent in your organization. And then secondly, HR also will have to see through and find out the practices and the behavior, are they really impacting on the people and that the people are actually responding to the kind of culture that you want. So this is really a big task because it's not really an easy formula, but you need your leaders to be able to really help you go through reforming your organization in the culture that you want. Okay, the model is J. Galbraith model. No, so that is spelled as J as in JAY, and then Galbraith is GALBRAITH. Galbraith.
Calvert.
This is what you call the STAR model.
Mm. I will also take note of that, Miss Beth. Star model.
The STAR model, J. Galbraith.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the change, another model that you can use is the Cotter model of change. No? Because Cotter
John
model,
Cotter.
Cotter, C-K-O double
K-O-T-T-R.
double T-E-R, Cotter
Mhm.
model of change. No? Because that's the one that actually, the Cotter model of change really starts off with what is it that you want to change? And then how do you come up with you need to create a group, a collaborative group that will actually affect the change. So that's really available in Google and it's so easy to understand it. But these are the two models that I often use in OD.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you for that, Miss Beth. May I also inject something, Miss Beth, in
Sure.
relation to OD?
Mm-mm.
me naman on my end, aside from John Cotter, I also use Kurt Lewin.
Mhm.
Where do you want to go,
Mhm.
and where you are at the moment, and then you
Mhm.
can aid the interventions that will
Yes,
bring
that's
you
the
to
one I
the
was talking about, Mark, the current
yeah,
realities and new
yeah,
goals.
correct.
That's good to
So
know it.
and tama po na the culture of the company will be hinged heavily from the leaders, because the leaders will be the ones to model it, and
Mhm.
HR's role will be to assist and conduct the different interventions to help you achieve the goal or the strategies of the company. Okay, so that's actually we've ended the first round of questions. So congratulations po, marami pong salamat dun sa mga nagtanong. And we actually have few questions sa chat box, sa Q&A. We'll answer them later on. Please bear with us. We have gathered questions to answer. We'll answer them later on po when we still have time, or we'll inject them one by one later on po.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's try to. Okay, and yung second question is, okay, what should company look for applicants right now? Okay, what the companies are looking now for candidates are not just their uh, functional competencies, but their behavioral competencies, their behavioral skills. Like, what are tinatawag nga natin na soft skills, but ako nga minsan I also don't want it to be called soft skills, because they are somehow powerful skills that are needed for you to perform your job, or for you to be able to put something on the table for the benefit of the company. Uh, I've One of the things that we are looking for is the candidate should be able to show that they can be adaptive, that they are flexible, because we are now really living in a VUCA world, a volatile and uncertain. What's the letter C? Ambiguous the A. We can't remember the C. But anyway, but we are living in a VUCA world, which is and then pumasok pa ngayon itong pandemic. It's really make our lives really very challenging. But we should not be saddened, kasi tayo as HR leaders, uh, we should be the first ones to be able to adapt, so that we can also share these practices to our employees. So importante po that candidates can really show that they can be flexible and adaptive. During the time na sinasagot ni Miss VP Dean yung questions on L&D, communication is important. Communication is important. If we are always online and we deal with our business using different online platforms or our in-house communication tool, importante po that we use the correct grammar. We use the correct tenses, especially for our correspondences. So importante yung communication skills. Critical thinking is also important as a skill that we also look for candidates. And then we have the first few months to really model the employee to where we want the employee to perform, to what level we want the employee to perform. So yun yung basic items that we look for candidates, aside from, again, their functional competencies and their length of experience, just in case that they do have. The next question po, what are the factors to consider when making a hiring decision, especially if there's a dissenting opinion among members of the selection board? Which are the most important? Okay. I assume that this question is when you are conducting a panel interview, and you have definitely some of the meron disadvantages and advantages ang panel interview. And at times, yung dissenting opinion of the different panelists during the interview, doon talaga minsan lumalabas. Now, if you are try to create first a matrix prior to coming to a panel interview, and then agree with the panelists on the matrix that you are to use. And then, because if you have the matrix, whether the panelists have dissenting opinion on the candidate or different candidates, you will be guided by that matrix. And then once the matrix is fulfilled, go back to the meeting board and discuss among other members of that panel for a decision. Minsan, if you encounter a stumbling block, I normally propose a recess, kumbaga, parang nasa court ka, you request for a recess so that everyone can step back, analyze what transpired during the panel interview, and then come back different day or a different time, and then convene again to decide what's best for the company. At the end of the day, you are making a decision for the company, not for each or not for yourselves. So that's how I want to answer these two questions. If my co-panelist would have inputs, you may do so po.
Mark?
Yes, Miss Beth, please.
Okay. Normally, what I'd look for in an applicant is really the attitude, no? Or we have behaviors that we want in an organization. I'll cite you three, no? Accountability, performance orientation, and then the collaborative, no? So that's what I look for, because in my mind, I think when you have the fundamental skills already, that can really be enhanced. But if you're so good, but you can't have those behaviors that we want, then probably that's not what we actually look for, because you know the functionality or the technical competence can actually be learned, but the behavior is something that is inherent in you, and it's really a resultant of all your experiences, no? Because we've had very good people before but didn't last long with us, simply because they can't blend in, as you said. The person should be able to be flexible enough to really blend in an organization. And when, for example, we do have dissenting opinion, the way we do it is that we have to agree and live with the decision. If somebody has a dissenting opinion, what we do is like a force field analysis. We look into the pluses and minuses of the person. And if in the end, the consensus of the group is that we will have to live with a decision, then either one, you put the person on probie period, because there are times when you hire person regular right away, no? So you can observe the person during the probationary period, because that's, to me, I think that's a good opportunity to really assess whether the person will blend in or not, no? And then during that time, look into whatever gap that this person may have. Try to monitor and really see if the gap is something that is going to be detrimental to the organization, and you can probably see that within the next 6 months, no? So to me, I think if you're okay and can live with that decision, you can put the person on probie period. If there's only a few, no, if there's only a few gaps.
Okay. Thank you for that, Miss Beth. Really good inputs. Okay, let's move to the next set of questions for labor relations for Attorney Linus. Is the employer obliged to pay employees who were required to go on 14-day quarantine by client? A second question, can a company impose mandatory overtime? And can workers opt out from such arrangement? Sir?
Well, Mark, the first question here is another contentious issue. But in reality, or legally speaking, the employer is not obliged to pay the employees during this 14-day quarantine period. So the labor department encouraged that the employer just pay the leave credits to the employees, or it's not prevented that employers can extend or add leave credits to these employees. And again, going back to the flexible work arrangements, the employee and employer can mutually agree to let the employee work at home or telecommuting.
Yeah.
All right.
So
If I may share,
Go ahead,
Mark,
Miss Beth.
um,
Miss Beth.
Attorney Linus is actually correct. What we do, if in any case, any of our employees will have to go on 14-day quarantine, our guideline says that if you're on 14-day quarantine, and you can work from home because, and not as if, because there are certain cases where you just have to go on 14-day quarantine, but you're not really ill, but if you can work from home during those 14 days, then you're considered work from home. However, if in case this is a serious case that you have to really, then you can file your sick leave for that case.
here.
Okay.
Actually, the employer can make arrangements also to shoulder the cost of testing if needed,
Yeah. Mhm.
so that the employee can prove to the employer that he's no longer sick,
Mhm.
and it's safe for him to go back to work with his colleagues.
Yeah, I also think that maybe if the can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe if the employee still would have sick leave credits, they can use that. Or as you said, they have few work from home arrangements.
Mhm.
But again, in the spirit of being humanitarian, maybe we can add, you know, like a COVID sick leave credit, something like that. We can
Yes,
be we can be a little creative, maybe like covering half of that, so that the employee will really be encouraged to do the full quarantine, because otherwise baka magpalit will decide to go back to work because of lost income dahil wala ng leaves, and then everyone will be contaminated the more it becomes a problem. So this is something that we can do additionally.
yes,
Agree.
correct.
Thank you for those inputs.
For the second question,
Yes, po.
uh, can company impose mandatory overtime? The answer is yes. But there are only 5 grounds that the company can impose. Otherwise, the employee can refuse. Those 5 grounds are: number one, when there is war or national or local emergency. Number two, there's imminent danger to public safety. Number three, work to be performed on machines or equipment in order to avoid serious loss or damage. Fourth is it is necessary to prevent loss or damage to perishable goods. And lastly, it's the completion or continuation of work to prevent serious obstruction or prejudice to the business or operations of the employer. Outside those 5 instances, the employee can refuse mandatory overtime.
Mm. Okay.
If within those instances and the employee refuses to render overtime, that employee may be subject to disciplinary action.
Okay. That is
But
well answered.
during this period, of course, it's there must be a mutual understanding between employer and employees of what is urgent, what is needed, or what's in the best interest of both the company and the employee. So I think both parties must be flexible at these times.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney
Maybe
Linus.
their inputs.
Other panelists, meron po kayong additional?
Mm.
Balikan ko lang po kanina yung yung sa VUCA, the letter C is complex. So volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Thank you for Joanna Chung for reminding. Okay, compensation and benefits. We have two questions again. What other pay, like hazard pay, hazard, or mix of benefits can be provided to employees at this time to motivate them given the current situation? The
Okay,
second
before-
question.
The first question first.
Sige po.
Okay.
First question.
So, I'd like to give a little background first before I answer the question. So, number one, everyone is negatively affected by this pandemic. In fact, most businesses are even struggling to survive. So, ang aim na lang nila stay afloat.
Yes.
And therefore, we could have retrenched employees. But for those, if we don't do that, then that means that for the employees that stay, that in itself is already a motivation because they still would have a job, no? Whether they're on work rotation or whatever arrangements you have that is reducing their pay, then they should be happy that they still have a job. Therefore, now is not the time to add benefits because it would, there is a cost implication of adding benefits. And as we know, once you give, you cannot take away. So to me, what is very important now is communication. Communicate that, you know, what you're doing as a company to stay afloat and make sure that they would still have work like that. So that the expectation relative to additions will not be there anymore. However, if, for example, you have so much money and maybe you're a telecom company, because I heard that they're the only ones not affected by this pandemic. So maybe if you want to give because you have a lot of money, then there are certain things that you can consider. The first one is an improvement in your HMO, in your medical benefits. No? What can you do? Kasi ngayon, health is the problem. Eh. So review whatever arrangements you have with that HMO, especially, you know, they have a lot of exceptions on COVID. I don't know what will make them, like, for example, cover COVID tests or COVID consultations. Yung mga ganyan, no? Look at improving the medical benefits. Or maybe work from home, no? Work from home benefits. So like an internet allowance or increasing your communication allowance, diba? Or some people are even talking about electricity subsidy. Kasi nga naman, now they're like opening their air cons or it is taking a toll also on the electricity cost. So if you can afford to make a subsidy like that, why not? So as Beth mentioned earlier, maybe be flexible. As she said in her company, parang dati transportation allowance, now they're more flexible and allowing them to convert that to communication allowance or uniform allowance. Hindi naman kailangan mag-uniform. So being flexible also with respect to other benefits that you already have. So you don't have to add on, but rather being just more flexible in the interpretation or in the implementation of certain benefits. So I would like to say also that maybe we can cover anything that's COVID related. Kanina I did talk about maybe additional sick leaves for COVID cases. and covering the test, di ba? We would have the test. So, especially for rapid tests, di ba, you have to do it maybe every 2 weeks, every 1 month. No? So, in a case like that, maybe you say, okay, first time company will pay for it kasi medyo expensive. But then, you would realize that, hey, sandali, you know, you test and then they're negative and then they go out and probably they're contaminated, bringing the virus inside the company. So really, dapat magti-test ulit. But again, it would cost a lot of money. So what will you do? Would you cover that? Or would you say, na, oh, sige, 50-50? Hindi naman pwede because you're the one requiring it. So you have to cover that, especially for high-risk position. So related to that is that what about testing of relatives? Kasi they said, okay, the company will provide you COVID test free for the employee. What about the relatives? Kasi baka mamaya sila yung may COVID or mahawa, no? Or you want to make sure na hindi mahawa yung COVID-free employee mo with their family. So then now they're saying, pwede bang i-cover din yan? Sa akin, overkill naman if you do that. Kasi hindi na naman natin sila employee. But maybe if you can do some in-house COVID testing and maybe charge them for at cost. How much is the cost of a kit and the medical practitioner to do that? No? That is something that you can do to cover their family members. To me, that's a good benefit already, especially in this case. Okay, so those are my inputs.
Our next
I'd like
question.
to share a little bit, if I may, on that question.
Okay.
I'm glad that Marisa brought up the matter of the relatives and or the family members. One of the things that we've found very useful is to make sure that the employee, as well as his household members, are monitored in terms of their health status. Because remember, our employee stays healthy as our goal, pero influence yan by the health of the household members. If somebody in the family or in the household gets the COVID virus, it will impact our employee as well. Now, at the same time, we want to balance. Syempre, employers right now are also challenged in terms of budget. Diba? Paano nga ba yan? One of the things that I've found useful is first come from an understanding na sa Filipino culture, very important sa atin yung family. Diba? And right now, since people are working from home, the family situation is their primary environmental situation as well. We've realized na there are less people now who would avail of the other benefits. Katulad nung annual physical exam, usually. May budget dyan ang companies for an annual physical exam. And some companies impose it. But for that annual physical exam to take place, you have to go either to a clinic or a hospital. So, pwedeng bakang this year, hindi ma-avail yan ng lahat ng employees. The company is willing to be flexible. That budget can now be a pool of money that can be allocated towards possibly testing of family members. There's a medical allowance that can be provided, which can be extended to family members as well. Usually yan, pwede naman yang by reimbursement. So pwedeng hindi si employee ang gumagamit ng medicine, but it becomes a medicine that is extended to the family members. So it means a lot in terms of motivating employees if they realize that the company cares for them as well as their family members, maski immediate family lang.
Yes. I think the key here is flexing, diba? Flexing
Yes.
the benefit without adding costs. Kasi nga, lahat tayo very cost conscious now. Yes, so that's something that we can do. Look at the benefits that we're not using, maybe, and then fixing it for other more important COVID-related situations. Okay.
Yeah, pwede nating i-divert. Naalala ko yung optical benefit. Yung usually companies merong glass for glasses, di ba? Dental benefit. Like as Marisa said, i-ano natin, i-reallocate yung budget.
Agree.
Yeah.
Thank you for that additional inputs, VP Lane. Ms. Marisa, I'd like to read the second question. How does the pandemic play a factor in designing the total rewards package of a company?
Okay, I think this is related to the question earlier, but I would say that again, this is not this is the time to be conservative because again, making the business stay afloat, di ba? So this is not the time to give huge increases or huge rewards packages. So we have to be conservative because of course what you give you cannot take away, di ba? However, one thing that I see that would have an implication here is that as you reduce employees, then that would mean that for employees that are left, then they would probably have expanded roles. Okay? Mas dumami yung trabaho because you took out two of the staff and there's only one left. So this is the time for us to probably do a reevaluation of the position, a job evaluation, reevaluation, and if indeed you're able to show that that position has expanded to be at a higher job grade, maybe that's something that you can do. But other than that, or again, continue also the performance management system pala. Kahit na naman 3 months tayo naka-work from home, there are people that are performing well compared to others, di ba? So that continues. So if you have a regular performance evaluation system with your merit increases, then I think you should continue to do that. But other than that, my tip is be conservative.
Mhm. If I may add, Mark, no,
Go
I
ahead,
think one
Ms.
of the
Beth.
things that you can actually do is, as Marisa said, you cannot add, but what you can do is repurpose. You can repurpose the things that you give, no? But in repurposing the things that you give, you just have to ask for employee consent, and therefore it's very important to do the communication to the employees, because by law, if you change your benefit, that might really be a conflict. But if you explain and agree, and they sign off, then that's not going to be an issue. So you can probably do repurposing. So for example, as Marisa was sharing, if you have a certain benefit that has an allowance, like a transportation, you can actually use it in terms of, instead of transportation, you can actually repurpose it for something else, which is more relevant to the employee. But what is important is that I think what works is this, because COVID, you don't know how long it will be, right? You have to have a timetable for it. So hindi siya magiging diminution if you only repurpose it for a certain period of time, and then and also the other aspect is you have to get employees' consent. And when you do have an employee consent, you have to ask them to affix their signature that they're okay by repurposing it. So those are some of the things that you can probably look into.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Beth.
Thank you, Ms. Beth. Okay. Ako, I just like to share lang with SPI. So instead of giving hazard pay, what we did since the lockdown started, we provided food for everyone,
Mhm.
especially nasa terminals namin, where our terminals are operating 24/7. So we provided all their meals, and then we provided vitamin C. Medicines are
here.
also available in case. The same nabanggit ni VP Lin, we also do monitoring, not just our employees, but up to the extent of their family members. Kasi once we've agreed with our employees that whoever gets sick in the family, they have to report to us so that we can monitor. And then dun sa earlier question, I forgot to share this. With regard to leave credits, the company is shouldering a portion of the 14-day quarantine na required for them. So para hindi lahat magamit sa leave credits nila. So that's how we are currently doing it, and done it with regard to yung time ng lockdown. So let's proceed. Thank you, Ms. Marisa. Thank you, Ms. Beth.
Thank you.
Okay, for L&D, are there new leadership competencies and skills to learn in relation to then disruptions or to the disruptions caused by the pandemic?
Leadership skills are most important at this time. They're not actually new, but they become top priority. Number one is risk management. Number two, crisis management and crisis communication skills. Number three is business continuity and resiliency planning. In the past, nung walang crisis, walang pandemic, normally there's a function that's relegated in the company who is in charge of this. So you will have a crisis communication team, a crisis management team, there's going to be a business continuity team or a leader. But now, every leader should have these three skills: crisis management and crisis communication, business continuity and planning, and risk management. Because for the business to survive, kailangan lahat ng functional heads are thinking along these directions. Now, aside from this, there are 6 critical leadership competencies that are highlighted. I have a slide that can be flashed here, which is necessary and top priority also during this pandemic. Jeff or Ishi, could you flash the next slide on 6 critical leadership competencies, right? I already mentioned change management. There are several models that you can look at change management to be able to dissect, no? Ano ba yung blocks of skills under change management? To put it very simply, I would think in terms of 3 change management skills: preparation, acceptance, and institutionalization of the changes that you want to put in your organization. And learning how to put this within a certain time frame, being aware of what are the reactions of people that are commonly demonstrated at each stage of the change. Within that change management framework, the leader should have the ability to set new directions and lead with a vision. Kasi wala namang template or guideline or manual to tell us what will happen to the world, what will happen to the business environment after this crisis, how long is this crisis going to last. And yet for the business to survive, you need to think, ano bang magiging direction natin? Kasi some products, some services may not be relevant to your market right now. So kailangan mag-isip ang leader ng new directions and lead with a vision so that people will buy into that new direction that you are setting. Part of this, number 3, related to this, is the ability to act decisively without clear guidance and information. You will not have all the details, and we don't have the luxury of time to be able to conduct a lengthy research, a feasibility study, do a long SWOT analysis before we make a decision, because the environment is moving very fast and we need to be able to keep our businesses competitive, keep our people engaged and inspired. So there has to be that skill, that ability to discern and to be able to make a decision without all of the information, and most often without clear guidance, even from top management. This is a time also for humility for all of us. Nobody has all the answers. Even top management is also navigating the crisis and setting directions in a context wherein there's so many variables which are unpredictable. So kailangan every leader, if necessary, can decide, and be able to make a clear-cut choice on the right action to take for that situation that needed to be addressed. So obviously, kailangan natin dito yung how do we navigate and help people to navigate complexity and confusion. As Mark said earlier, we live in a VUCA world. with the pandemic, naging times 10 yung VUCA environment natin. It's very volatile. The cases are rising every day. So uncertain. We don't know, will there be a vaccine? Will there be a medicine that can be discovered? Very complex, so many factors. May government regulations, may people concerns. So confusion can really happen. A leader has to be comfortable and have the skill to navigate, to discern, to analyze, and to help people navigate this new complex that we have. So, importante yung communication skills. This is a time when you need to be very clear about what you are saying, what direction you're setting, to be honest and humble when you say, I don't have all the answers now, but at the same time, inspiring and compelling. Inspiring in the sense na kailangan merong hope, may communication of hope, of optimistic realism, to make it a compelling message that whenever we have a town hall meeting, we have a department meeting, kailangan compelling yung messaging natin. And then fifth, huwag natin kalimutan, it's a skill of a leader to continue to nurture employees, to nurture morale, and to keep engagement up. So marami pa, pero ma-overwhelm tayo kasi all of us are also facing this crisis and we have our personal stresses. So I've identified these 6, and these 6 will lead to you being able to manage risk, continue the business, build resiliency, and manage the crisis. Yung question as number 2 under this section of learning development, may nagtanong na, I'm a new HR person, I'm not just new in the HR department. So what do you suggest for me to learn first as a newbie HR practitioner? Ibabalik ko dito sa leadership competencies na slides natin. No? Whether you are new as in young, newbie, or baka naman experienced HR person ka na, and then you just joined a new HR department, or you came from another function, maybe from operations, finance, admin, or even sales, production, and you were assigned to the HR department. Definitely, these leadership competencies that I was talking about, and I'd like the team of office to flash the leadership, the next slide again. These are things that you need to learn because bago ka sa department, you're new, and yet changes are happening. You need to be able to navigate that so that you can make a contribution. There are 5 skills that I would say anybody who is transitioning from a first-time leadership to a first-time leadership role. Dati kang individual contributor, wala ka namang minamanage na tao. Tapos napunta ka in a position where you're now a leader, and especially if you're in HR, even if you are a staff level, when you're an HR person, I tell you, you are a leader. You don't need to be managing people because people in the organization are looking up to you. And they count HR people to be leaders during this time. So, itong 6 skills na to important. Simulan mo sa navigating. Number 1, so I'll talk about 5 things you need to prioritize no, as a newbie in the HR department. Navigating. You need to learn about the personalities, the work styles, the priorities of your department, your teammates, kilalanin mo sila, kilalanin mo yung environment mo, navigate around the people whom you work with in the company, who are the departments that you most coordinate with, especially at this time, most coordination are online, so wala kang face-to-face interaction, medyo mas complex yan. But to navigate, to get to know the people, get to know the situation, is very important. So navigate, okay? Number 2, aspire. Don't let the pandemic to put you in a reactive mode. As HR people, kailangan proactive pa rin tayo. So, do not wait na ano kaya ang mangyayari tomorrow or next week and then you react and make your plans. I would say aspire. Have a vision for what you want to contribute in the HR department. Talk to your boss in HR, your immediate superior, and find out what is the HR vision during this time, so that you can aspire to contribute, aspire to help achieve that vision. Pag medyo malinaw na sa isip mo, ano kaya ina-aspire ko na maging contribution ko, maging significant difference? Na kung wala ako, hindi na siguro nila to ma-achieve. That's how you make a difference with your presence. Then you drive, right? You drive and mobilize because you cannot do this alone. So learn how to mobilize teammates. A lot of HR work is collaboration with other departments, other contributors in other teams. So learn how to collaborate, how to drive, how to mobilize people. And then lastly, how to sustain your efforts. We don't want to be seen sa HR na may bagong programa, may bagong initiative, it's a flash in the pan, nawala after a couple of months. Yeah. We need to discern and know how we can sustain the programs because people are counting on us. And that goes into nurturing employees, nurturing morale, and engagement. Pag ang programs masyadong papalit-palit, right? Nako-confuse din lalo yung mga tao, ano ba yan gusto nating marating? And it takes time for programs to be effective in terms of delivering the results expected. So we need to be patient and identify how we can keep improving. And this is how people will see that HR really makes a difference. And even a newbie like you, to whoever asked this question, you can make a difference in the department.
Thank you for that, VP Lin. Ang ganda ng sagot. VP Lin, nag-create ako ng acronym dun sa Navigate, Aspire, Mobilize, and Sustain. So whoever the person who asked that question, that newbie, always remember NAMS. Not Vietnam, but NAMS. Navigate, Aspire, Mobilize, and Sustain.
Right.
But
That's
I'd
great.
I'd like to add to that if that would be okay, VP Lin. Always think of what can I add value to the organization. Once we remain constant of putting in value to the organization, yun yung impact natin as HR professionals. Okay? And then, by the way, we have 97 attendees dito sa WebEx. We are also live on Facebook and in YouTube. Meron pa po bang gustong i-add ang ating ibang panelists regarding do sa last two questions on L&D? None. Again, thank you, VP Lin. We move to OD. Okay, Ms. Beth Nasol. How can a change-resistant organization be developed? And how can we encourage employees to still be productive despite work burnout? Ms. Beth? Ms. Beth, nakamute ka po.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
hear me, Mark?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I was saying that question is hard, na? How can a change-resistant organization be developed? No? You know, in any change, an organization usually goes through parang ano yan eh, it's like personal life, di ba? When you don't like the change that happened, you go through a change curve, no? A change curve, meaning first there's resistance to the change, no? Because you can't cope, so there's frustration, no? And therefore, when there's frustration, it seems like everything is really falling apart, diba? And that's part of a cycle in the change curve, no? What is important, and that cycle, when you're change resistant, is that to me is what you call in the change curve, it's called stagnation, because you can't move. Parang you're all paralyzed, you don't know what to do. Okay? What is important is that you need to really assess, no, and make a decision to change. But that takes a lot of effort, no, because somebody has to, and probably the leader should really impose this, no, making a change and deciding on what change to do, no, because you can't be in stagnation. If not, then your business will probably fail. Okay. When you have already realized that there's a decision to change, what is important is that you start preparing yourself. Okay. And when you talk about preparing yourself, you have to learn to engage yourself or parang put a focus on what will actually make you move forward, no? And what is important there is you do planning and you do communication. You have to psych yourself that you need to move so that you can get yourself out of that stagnation. So what do you do there? You have to create a vision. You have to create a goal that I am going to lift myself from my stagnation to this point, to another point where I can move on. No, and vision again is and the driver of that is the leader, and the HR will have to be supportive of that vision. So you also have to help your leaders, parang ano get them out of that stagnation. So I think here the HR is very important, especially the HR leader, because you will have to lead them to the light, no, of where to go so that you can uplift the organization. And then you go into form of implementation, and when you go to forms of implementation, you start listing down what are the things that I need to do to lift myself or get myself out of that stagnation, because if I don't, then I will remain in that stagnation and that business will actually fail. The next thing that you need to do is you have to have a focus and a determination to get your plan going and executed. Sometimes it's not easy because you have to influence your colleagues, your cohorts, no, to uh, to get out of that stagnation. But once you're able to get a collaborative group, no, and it doesn't have to be many. You can start off with a few who are good influencers, and then later on, that will actually increase in the number when they see the light or when they're more clear about the vision. Then you go into fruition. But the most difficult part is really the determination to move forward, because some will probably backslide, some will not believe, some will be believers or will be engaged, will have a mix of people. So it's very important. The HR should really be sturdy and should really have a strong heart to weather all this, because the role of the HR is really to orchestrate every little piece that will happen in the change. No? So it's not really hard, but it can be done because everybody starts with a stagnation. Di ba? Para yung in your personal life, you become heartbroken, di ba? And you can't move on. But you have to do something about yourself, because eventually, if you're there being heartbroken, you'll never find your true partner, right? So I think what is important is to make that realization, create the vision for yourself, create a plan to achieve your vision, have the determination and the heart to weather the storm so that you can uplift yourself from the stagnation. And I think that's a very nice formula for a change resistant organization. But in all this, communication is very important because there will be believers, there will be non-believers, there will be backsliders. So I think it is important to have that uh, skill of being able to effectively communicate. And communication is not one piece, no. Depending on who you meet, you will have different communication styles for different types of people. So you have to understand your organization very well. So the next question, I wonder whether it is a clear answer, no? And if there are any other subsequent questions, then probably we can take it on. Um, there is a question here. Is it still acceptable to hold employees under... okay, I won't discuss it because that's another question. How can we encourage employees to be productive despite work burnout? I think that's kind of difficult to really... when you have a work burnout, para yan yung stagnation eh. So you have to encourage the employee, you have to create a vision together with, as I've mentioned to you, this is like a change resistant organization. Eh. Like an employee, a burnout is a stagnation, it's a stage of stagnation. It's a frustration, it's desperation. So the way to do that is for the employee to realize that there's more to it than the current, no? Which means that he has to create his own goal. No? And if, for example, his goal is not really aligned anymore with the organization, then probably you can coach him out of the organization. if it's not aligned. But if you can still save on that employee, because sometimes a burnout employee is it's well, an employee becomes burnout when he becomes confused about what he needs to do. So I think what is important also is to help him or coach him to be able to realize his potential and how he can be a contributor to the organization. So again, here the technique is a lot of talking, one-on-one with the employee, and sometimes you might have to coach the employee and help him process his mind so that he can get out of that stagnation. I hope I answered the question, Mark.
Yes, ma'am. Very well. Very well. Actually, gusto ko lang, well, I just want to add on dun sa nasabi ni Miss Beth. It's really important na yung communication that if we can coach the person. Kasi minsan yung burnout could be an uttered word that hindi naman talaga yun ang ibig nila sabihin.
That's
Minsan
correct.
they just want to be heard. And sabi ni Miss Beth kanina, they could be confused. Oftentimes that they are confused and they think that they are already burnt out, but they're just confused. So we just have to talk it out with them. Tama po yun. We just have to talk with them.
And if the person cannot relate with somebody inside the organization, there's a lot of companies that offer coaching. One of which I have an experience, is My Golana. My Golana is available in the website. They give you, I think, 2 or 3 free sessions. You go through a diagnostic test to determine if you have anxiety levels or your psychological makeup is okay, or not. And then they give you right away the test. I went through that also because I also wanted to find, because there are moments during the early part of the COVID that you don't know whether you're doing what correct or not. So you just wanted to bounce it off, not to somebody inside the organization, but also outside of the organization, just to assure you if you're okay or not. So once you go through that test, you determine now what your psychological behavior is or your anxiety level, okay, because they track it. And then later on, you ask for a counselor, okay? And you can choose from the counselors. You can choose a senior counselor, young counselor, depending on the age you are or where your comfort level is. And what I know is that they give free sessions, I think 2 or 3 free sessions. And you can schedule your counseling sessions. After which, then that's the time that you pay, and it's very minimal only. So I think this is something that we can actually explore because they offer good programs, especially so when the employee, because when you're burnout, sometimes the employee doesn't trust anybody in the org, right? So you can probably lead that person to somebody external. In my case, what I've been doing is I've been doing a lot of communication channels. I have one-on-ones, I have function to function, I have cross-functional dialogue. So here you have to be in HR, you really have to be very proactive, creating all these venues of communication because in times of crisis, you never know who's really affected today. They may be smiling, but actually, yun pala, at the back of they're actually affected. So we have to be sensitive, And one of the things that I think leaders or HR practitioners should have now is the empathy. We need to understand where they're coming from. Now, sometimes they'll be saying something, but which is not really what they mean, as you have said. But I think what is important is really to empathize and to do a lot of listening because that's where you find out whether and that's probably also a way by which you can encourage employees because they may just want to have a sounding board.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Miss Beth. So if meron tayong aplikante and we are looking, let's say, applicant for HR, one of the skills that we would want to see from them is their listening skills.
Yes.
So
yes.
coming that from Miss Beth, listening skills, that's important. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. These 2 questions I will be answering, and then we'll get one from the Q&A chat room. Let's try to answer them also. Okay, what are the current trends in hiring technical and hard-to-fill positions? Okay, our company, especially in the terminals, it's highly skilled functions that we employ. You know, what we do is we create a succession plan. That we get new employees on board, whether OJT, fresh grad, no experience. We get them on board. We partner with different schools in the areas or the community that we operate. At sila yung ginagamit namin to be hired. So again, yung pipeline namin in partnership with different schools, yun yung trend that we are doing to fill highly technical or hard to fill positions. You may also want to explore different recruitment outfits that you can partner also with. Those are mga positions that you are having a hard time fulfilling. Hindi naman lahat ng recruitment firms are expensive. You can definitely work with them, especially with their rates. Pwede nyo naman mapag-usapan yan. So you can partner with recruitment firms. But I would suggest na for positions that are highly technical, you create a pipeline from within. Get people from within, because people who will be, let's say, moving up from the ranks will always be a good morale boosting effort or recruitment strategy for the company. Second question was, what are the effective ways in filtering good talents from a pool of applicants? Definitely you have we have very large or pool of talents that you can choose from. Normally, pagka nagkakandak ka ng assessments, I usually use SHaRe model when I conduct my interview, the situation, the task, and the actions taken, and the results, to just see how the candidates are thinking. And then it will be depending on the position also. Kung gaano karami yung pwede mong pagpilian, as long as you have you create different tiers of filtering your candidates. Use different methods, let's say from the screening of CVs to the interview, to the whether the interview is face-to-face or online. You can do ways of assessing employees so that you can get the person to be on board. Hindi lahat ng maganda ang CV will be a job fit or org fit sa inyo. Hindi ibig sabihin na maganda yung experience niya will be the best person to be hired. At times you may have to consider the attributes ng is the person collaborative, is the person has a good disposition. So those skills you may want to consider in really filtering or funneling good talents from your pool. And then the third question I'd like to read from the chat box on recruitment is it is understandable that companies would like to take highly qualified individuals, but how can we give employment opportunities to the less qualified, knowing a great percentage is unemployed nowadays? There are companies that would want to have a plug-and-play candidate. and at times it will cost you more. But the companies who are somehow managing their expenses, then you can get candidates qualified also, but less qualified, but you are willing to take the candidate to a journey, meaning once you onboard the employee, kumbaga doon siya mag-grow sa company. If we are, then we can now give opportunities to less experienced or less experienced siguro, not less qualified candidates. That's how I would take it on that question. My dear panelists, baka meron kayong gustong i-add to that, to answer to that question. Okay. Kung wala, sige, let's move to the next, to the labor relations, and then hopefully, Attorney Linus, if we could, no, entertain one question from the chat room as well after you have
Sure.
answered these two. Thank you, sir. In the light of recent events, do you consider a probationary employee to be eligible for separation pay if they are terminated on the grounds of retrenchment? If not, why?
Actually, the answer is yes. Even though a probationary employee, usually less than 6 months, or a maximum of 1 year if both parties agree to an extension of the probationary period, he is still eligible for separation pay if he is terminated on the grounds of retrenchment. As Ma'am Beth already mentioned, the minimum for this situation is 1 month salary. So it's very defined, very specific.
Our next question po, para kay Attorney Linus.
Can I add to that?
Oh, go ahead, Miss Marisa, please.
Yeah, I agree that even if it's a probationary employee and you're terminating on the ground of retrenchment, they will have to repay the separation benefits. However, if the employee is like marginal, yung hindi naman pa, like, di ba COVID ngayon, yung ganyan, no? So, you can, and marginal yung performance niya. Maybe you don't have to reflect it as terminating due to retrenchment, but rather for non-performance or not meeting the performance requirement, of which you just have to let them go, di ba? And you don't have to pay anything.
Correct.
Di ba? Minsan kasi parang there are some managers that are having a hard time. Yung parang, hindi ko kasi in my conscience say that they did not perform well because they were really exceptional probationary employees. So, well, if that is the case, then talagang separation pay yan under retrenchment. Pero kung pwede naman, marginal, maybe swing towards the non-meeting of the performance standards para wala nang separation pay. Malinis, di ba? Okay? That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Marisa. Let's move to the next question. Can employees sue their employers if they have not implemented safety measures against COVID-19?
Well,
Tough question.
legally, the answer is yes. But of course, we do not want to recommend this. Employees can sue their employers before the regional office of the Department of Labor and Employment. But of course, we do not want to recommend adding gasoline to the fire already. So maybe the better option is to inform or update your employer of the safety measures not yet being implemented or being fully implemented. Let's be constructive during these times.
Okay.
Ma'am Beth, your
Miss Beth? Nakamute po kayo.
Mute.
Go ahead.
Good. Okay, sige. I agree with Attorney Linus. No? In this situation, you have to be very careful about your next steps, no? Because you don't want to agitate situations that is already agitated, diba? And therefore, to me, I think everything that we do can actually be resolved through a very good dialogue. I always believe in that, that you just have to put a little more faith on the other person so that you can actually, it's very possible that your employers are not fully aware that the safety measures are not in place, or it's very possible that there are certain lapses, no, that you need to remind. No? And I think most employers today would be welcome because they're also in a state of on or it's conflicted because they're also victims of COVID. No? So you really cannot blame some of or how people are reacting to the situation. So as mentioned by attorney, you don't want to add fuel to the fire, but really more of try to resolve things through a very good dialogue and reminding each other that perhaps there are certain protocols that we need to implement, and one of which is always looking after employee welfare and wellness. And if your stance is like that, you become cool, relaxed, and all that, that will not actually, it will help people manage whatever difficulties that we have today. So I'm good. I think Mark is not here.
Hello.
You're
Okay.
unmuted.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, Miss Beth. Nakamute po ako kanina. Sorry. Okay. Can we get another question? Okay, for Attorney Linus. Attorney Linus, one last question lang from the Q&A chat group, Q&A chat box. What are your suggestions to having a successful CBA negotiations during this pandemic? What are your suggestions to having successful CBA negotiations?
Well, as previous panelists mentioned, actually now is not the time to ask for more. It's the mode here is for survival, to maintain the status quo at least. Well, that if you get that status quo, that should be a win for you. So, I mean, the best way is to help your company survive or profit, to maintain
Agree.
the employees. I mean, just make sure that your colleagues still have work after the end of the day. So I guess that's the more prudent approach as of the moment.
I agree. I agree. Mas kailangan natin ng meaningful conversations or dialogue with one another.
Yeah.
Dahil pareho lang tayo mawawalan just in case. So thank you for that answer, Attorney Linus. We can now
Yes,
move to the next.
it's more of
Yes, sir.
not kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Ayos yan. Thank you. Let's move to the next. By the way, once we have accomplished this cycle, we will take a pause for 15-minute break, and then we will resume to our fourth round of questions. Okay. For compensation and benefits, for a startup company, how much is a standard rate for monthly salary and other benefits for newly hired rank and file employees?
How much? Okay, if you are a startup company, then from a compensation point of view, then you have to make sure that you pay at the minimum wage for the region. So, at yung Manila NCR is 5%. So that depends on where you are. So basically, minimum wage. And then you also have to implement the statutory benefits, diba? 5-day service incentive, the OT, all of those minimal benefits, cover them with SSS, pag-ibig, PhilHealth. So, I guess dapat yun muna eh. Startup ka pa lang, don't start high, but rather comply with the law and start from there. And from there, little by little, as you make money, then you can introduce some of these benefits. Yung mga ano, if you are beginning, one benefit that I would advise can be those that are related to catastrophic conditions. Kasi ito yung mas importante, di ba? Maybe you can start with an AD&D insurance. Very minimal lang ang cost nito. Or HMO. So if you cannot afford that, maybe like a medical allowance, kasi typically HMO, even at the lowest, would be around 20,000. Maybe medical allowance of 5,000, mga ganyan, or whatever benefits that can help them address catastrophic loss. Not, all of these grand benefits for a startup company. I hope this is what the one that asked the question meant.
Yes, let's ask the next question. How do we go about the process of salary structuring?
Okay, salary structures. Typically, I'm a rewards management consultant, and I would get calls about, can you do a salary structure for me? You cannot jump straight to doing a salary structure because there are several things that you need to do before you get into doing the salary structure. So what are these? The first one is you have to define your pay philosophy. So this is like this would tell you who is your market and where do you want to be relative to your market. So what is your target relative to this market? Would you want to be at the average, or would you want to be at the 75th percentile or 90th percentile, or whatever target market? So dapat defined yan. And then second, you have to do your job documentation. So here, once you have your job descriptions, then you look at evaluating it internally through a job evaluation program, or externally through getting your market data. Once you have your classification structure and your market data, then now you can design your salary structure. So those are the steps. No? It's a little complicated, a little mathematically based, and PMAP would have classes on this. In fact, I think we're offering it sa webinar already. This used to be a 2-day class, but then I think we are doing this already. So if you want to know the details, kasi practice to eh.
Mm-mm.
You have to know all of the mathematical things to be able to do that. As I said, there are steps to do before you do your salary structure.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Marisa. We now move to the next under learning and development. Another 2 questions po tayo. Let me read it for you. The main focus of most organizations now is to strengthen operations in order to recover financially. How can we make management realize that it is actually important to also focus on people development? Can you walk us through on the basic of TNA, or training needs analysis? That's the next question from Ms. Lin. Go ahead, Ms. Lin.
Yeah, let's take the first one that's here. How can we make management realize that it's also important to focus on people development? You know what? We need to be very clear in how we communicate this to management. And this is a fantastic opportunity for HR to really elevate our role in the organization. We've seen that this pandemic is actually a threat to people, right? A threat to their lives, a threat to their livelihoods. So people are really number one at this time. And when we think about how the business will survive, the only way that the business will survive is if there are people who have the right skills, the right attitudes, and the right level of motivation and engagement to make the company successful, to weather through this crisis, to bridge the gaps in terms of revenue generating opportunities for the company in comparison to the losses in revenue. It's people that will make all of this happen, right? And the need to upskill and to keep people sharp more than ever is very critical at this time. So I think if we put our way of explaining why our people programs are important, why developing people is important at this time to management, let's put it in the context of talking about business continuity and business recovery. Management will catch on to those terms because that's how management thinks. It thinks in terms of how do we keep this business going, because they also know that's how the business will continue to provide livelihoods for people. If we think that management does not care about people, then as HR practitioners, mag-start tayo with ourselves. Management cares about people and management realizes that people are important. Minsan, it's just a matter of, communication, the language that is used. Perhaps management talks about finances, cost cutting, and minsan, natitrigger yan mga emotions during that interaction, during that communication. Nagkakaroon ng gap in that communication na sometimes nagkakaroon ng perception that management does not realize that it's important to focus on people development. So let's start with us in HR, and all of us also people leaders, talking about people development in the context of business continuity and business recovery. Then we have a common ground. We have a common language by how we approach the situation. The need to strengthen operations will be addressed if people know how, right, to identify cost-saving techniques, if people know how to maintain quality and excellence in terms of products and outputs and customer service, in spite of the challenges that are impacting everyone today. So that's the context. Punchline answer is talk in terms of business recovery, business resilience through people who are competent, professional, and having the right skills to address the situation. Makikita ng management, people development remains important today. The second question, can you walk us through the basic of a training need analysis or a TNA? On the next slide, I have a basic framework na kailangan palaging tandaan natin in terms of doing training needs analysis. These are the different factors, the three factors that you need to consider. Can we have the PMAP office flash the next slide on screen? When we talk about training needs analysis, right, there are three factors that you need to keep in mind. Ito yung basic. Training needs analysis can be long and complex. There are different processes for doing that, right? For the purpose of giving the basics, first start with the three factors that you need to keep in mind to identify training needs. Number one, business needs. Number two, role competencies. And number three, individual development. Remember that training happens in the context of the business. And the business directions will give you the indicators on what would be the competencies that people need to develop in each of the different roles in the organization. That's why it's interlinked, right? Different businesses will have different priorities. Sometimes it's based on the maturity, the level of how the business has evolved, the directions that it's taking. So for a startup, probably the business needs will be different. There might be more technical, functional skills that are needed on the different roles. Kaya nakarelate yung role competencies. When you think about the different roles in the organization, there are competencies required of each role, right? And people need to be competent, need to demonstrate the competencies of this role. So that's why that's the second indicator. Ano yung training na kailangan nila? Because then you will do an analysis on what are the competencies that the people have already in relation to their roles? nasa na yung level of development of their competency in that particular role. They could be beginners, they could be intermediate, advanced, or experts already. So for example, pwedeng yung competency applies to the role as it progresses up the organization. But there will be different competency level requirements. So let's look at HR. A new HR contributor would need first basic knowledge of what are the different functions and services that are delivered by HR. And then you can deep dive, for example, compensation and benefits, learning and development, employee relations and engagement, recruitment or talent acquisition. If you look at, for example, learning and development, right, since that's our focus at this moment, an HR person can have different levels of competency in the different skills required of a learning and development specialist. Pwedeng sa una, ang alam lang niya muna is how to organize a training program, administrative support, and then can progress to delivering simple training sessions, progress to designing a training module, and then can progress to business partnering to identify training needs, right? So may iba-ibang role competencies. Again, this will give you an indicator ano yung mga needs for training when you now look at the individuals who occupy those roles. And that leads to individual development plans. So a beginner now can say, all right, now I know how to organize a training session. I would like for my own development to be able to conduct a simple session, maybe conduct the new hires orientation. Ano yung skills and competencies that I would need? So part of that will be presentation skills, communication skills, facilitation of a meeting session. So 3, if I don't have the skills for presenting, right, clearly and in a manner that's engaging to the audience, then that inputs now to my individual development plan. It's a training need that has been identified. So just to put this in context, when you think about a training needs analysis, there will be first the macro perspective in terms of the business needs, right? And you will identify major blocks of competency requirements now that the business needs to be able to move the organization forward. This will be broken down into the different roles in the organization and then further broken down to the individual training needs that will be linked to their individual development plan. I hope that's a simple enough walkthrough. There are many technical processes that will be part of it. You could have a survey. You could have a focus group discussion. You could have a one-on-one, the individual development planning. All of this input into identifying the training needs that will now be addressed by your training plan for the year.
Thank you, VP Lynn. Ms. Beth, would you like to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Very clear.
Okay, guys, I hope you learned from that. Okay, let's move to the next questions for Ms. Beth. How do you check weaknesses and strengths of individuals and teams during work from home setup?
Okay, how do we check weaknesses? You need to have a regular contact with your employees, or with teams. And this is the reason why you have to do a lot of communication venues, dialogues, whether this will be one-on-one or by groups or triads. And I'm doing a lot of that now, especially so with this kind of because all our city offices, head office, are all work from home until end of the year, because we would not want to predispose our employees to the COVID, especially so when now it's already GCQ. And sometimes that by asking a lot of questions. So one thing I learned is that you can have dialogues that are task related, but you also have to have dialogues that are informal based, and you can have that separate. And you have to do a lot of observing in terms of how they look, how they answer. Are they, there are times when they just hide behind the video, no? So they don't put on their video and all the time, or they'll be quiet. So which means that the person will probably be not engaged, no? So for me to be able to determine that is that they don't only ask questions, but I ask questions as well. You know? So I check out how they are. You know? So you can also observe people who are very upbeat. You know? But sometimes being upbeat doesn't necessarily mean they're okay also, because it's a way by which they can cope. You know? So you have to dig deeper. You know? And every now and then, I do a lot of unfreezing exercises that checks on or you can probably ask them, or you can probably ask, if you were a caller, what would that be? You know, so you have to use a lot of diagnostics, you know, for you to determine whether this person is not good or good. You know, sometimes I also do. I write letters of gratitude. I also write letters of finding out how they are, you know, to check on them, not only at work, but also on a personal level. So, you know, as HR, you have to do a lot of intervention, because there's no one intervention that will really determine whether your employees today are okay or not. You know? So you have to be very creative. And, you know, you can ask friends on how they're doing it, or you can probably ask, in a work from home setup, what's the best way to communicate with you? Sometimes I ask that. If in a work from home setup, what's the best way to communicate? No? Or what do you miss? Some questions I ask, what do you miss about being work from home? No? Or what challenges are you facing from work from home? What opportunities are you actually looking at in terms of work from home? So perhaps as HR practitioners, no, we need to, in your free time, write questions that you can ask your employees or your colleagues, no, just to find out, checking on the weaknesses and the strengths of individuals and teams during a work from home setup, and be creative. No? Sometimes, you know, when I have a meeting, I show a clipping of a film, no? And then we process the film, no? And find out um, how does that resonate with you? If you were the main characters, what would that be? How will that reflect on you? So there are a lot of ways by which you can do that. So I hope that you be creative enough, no? And then think about, and I'm sure a lot of the people here are young, no, and very creative and innovative. So I'm sure there will be a lot of ways by which you can ask whether they're okay or not. Or perhaps if you're into music, you can ask what's the best music, or what's the best song that describes how you are at the moment. And you can just imagine the kind of questions or titles that you will get from those conversations. So I hope I was able to provide some inputs there.
You did, ma'am. You did. Let's get, yeah. The next question is, what area in the organization should be prioritized in relation with OD?
Mm, as I mentioned to you, OD really cuts across a lot of things. Um, that's the reason why I am not only into OD, but I'm also into rewards. Because somehow, when you talk about OD, what you really want is to have a high performing organization. You know? So when you have a high performing organization, it touches on the productivity. But to do that, you have to have parang a concoction of of elements to or ingredients that will keep your employees engaged, no? As I've mentioned to you, one of which is really strengthening your communication, because communication is really a tool by which you get to know more about the employee. Another one would be really your performance management, because people need to be recognized, no? And there's this one thing that um, people would want to know how they're performing, and sometimes it's also a way to prove themselves in terms of competency through the performance management system. The third is really on the employee relations, or the activities that you do today in a work from home. You know, I'm very fortunate. I have very young, creative team, no, na they come up with so many employee relations activities. Because before, when it was normal, you have your sports, diba? You have your family gathering, you have your outing, no. So, but you can't do that anymore, large gathering. So what they're doing is that they still do a lot of employee related activities, but all digital, no. Yesterday I attended a bugtungan. Can you imagine bugtungan? So it's nice. Then they use a lot of this Kahoot, no, just to check on each other, and they really come out with very interesting questions. Sometimes they do, there's digital, how do you call that? Bingo. There's digital bingo. There is, they do the sing along or karaoke activities through digital as well. No? So that also is another area. One is you really have to continuously as Marisa has mentioned earlier, now is the time to check on also the structure that you have. Given that everybody's work from home, are you able to deliver it with a more efficient number that you have? Or probably it's time to look in terms of reviewing the roles. Because now most companies are veering away from jobs, but now going into roles, because roles could really be different from your jobs. So we can ask people to go through projects, through other activities, and probably this is the best way for you to determine who are or what positions or what roles should be relevant in today's. We also do our labor relations and I think that's also OD, because that to me, OD, when you talk about organizational development, high performing organization, you also have to look after your industrial harmony in the workplace. And to me, that's still part of OD, because the industrial harmony is really having regular discussions with your organized groups. Of course, some will initiate, especially so if you have rank and file employees and not too conversant on the digital platform, you might have to train them on how to do discussions, grievance machinery, in using the digital platform, either Google or your Zoom. Did you know that about a month ago, we closed a unified negotiation with rank and file and professional technical through Zoom. And they were so proud about it because Dolly has cited that we were the first company who closed a CBA negotiation using the digital platform. And they really felt so proud. So to me, that's still OD, because OD really encompasses, in some organization, they don't really, the head of HR is always into organizational development, and when you talk about head of OD, it covers the entire thing, because it doesn't only look in terms of services or strategies, but it also looks in terms of organizational dynamics. So that depends on what your priority would be today, because OD can actually cut across a lot of areas. I hope it answers the question.
Yes. I thank you for that answer, Miss Beth. I hope the person who asked the question was able to get very useful inputs from Miss Beth. Okay. For this third cycle of questions, we're now with that. We are moving to the fourth one, but before we move to the fourth cycle, we will be taking a break of 15 minutes. So time check, it's at 3:25. So we'll come back at 3:40.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So see each other again after 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
minutes lang yan, nai-exequera na ako.
So you can have one more later. Yeah.
Yeah. Sakto, just right after our session, we'll have my last coffee and then I head home.
Yeah, that's good. Well, ako sa akin, I measure by the liter, my 1 liter bottle of water. So,
How many do you?
meron pa- I try to consume minimum of 1 in a day. If I can do 2, better. Sometimes I go 1.5. Yeah, but easily 1 in 1 day. And then when we have a session like this, then I could consume 2.
Yes.
Because I don't know if you feel it. My throat gets really dry when you're talking a lot. So, yeah.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I keep
Correct.
it here beside me. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct.
So are we back?
Yeah, we
We should be, I think. Yeah.
should be. There you go. There's Ishi. Thank you, Ish. Okay, let's proceed. We have an hour and a half more to go. We hope that we will be able to answer all the questions raised to us. So let's proceed. Next 2 questions under recruitment. What are the effective recruitment interventions to use, especially for a security agency? Okay, if you're in a security agency, and definitely part of the recruitment process is a physical check, physical build. Can you check natin a security agency? Maybe you would want to streamline your process by doing some of your initial steps of recruitment online. Like earlier I mentioned, baka pwede yung online interview mo, you can do it to streamline your candidates. Let's say from a 50 candidates, and then you streamline by looking at their series, and then once you conduct the interviews, do it online, and then only when you need to have the candidates to be seen face to face, only then that you interview them or ask them to come over to your office. You will be able to answer social distancing. You will minimize cost for your candidates as well, because they don't have to commute, because commute, since nag-GCQ tayo, if you are in Metro Manila, is still very hard to do, and it's still very dangerous, to be blunt about it. Medyo mabigat po if nagko-commute talaga. So you can eliminate those, no? Mami-minimize mo yung risk of you being infected also, and your candidates being exposed or being vulnerable to the disease. So that's how I will answer your first question. And then can you share some recruitment myths? Okay. Well, for sure, yung mga kasama ko dito, we can also jump in later. To some, they think that recruitment is easy. That yung advertisement, madali lang gawin yan. You have a template. But no, you have to devise, nowadays you have to devise something that is, if you can use this word, palatable to the candidate, depending on the position that they are going to apply, dapat doon mo sila i-engage. So hindi siya basta advert lang na this is the position and the qualification, that's it. Next is, if you have a job description well written, you'll be able to find a good candidate, and then or the candidate will be able to see for themselves that this is the company that I would want to be part of. So hindi rin. It depends on the right competencies of this position, and then the interview is important also. So hindi siya, if you have a well-written job description, hindi siya, it doesn't end there. The recruitment process is really tedious process to do, because a good hire will give you a good returns instead of a bad hire that will be expensive. Kasi meron kang gastos sa onboarding, may gastos ka sa training, etc. And then if you have a mishire, that is costly, that is expensive. So you really wanted that to be looked at. That maybe the AI or artificial intelligence will replace the recruiters. Maybe not. Maybe not, because importante pa rin yung emotional intelligence kasi natin when we are conducting interviews. Whether we conduct this interview online, iba pa rin yung kausap mo is chatbot. You can set questions, yes, but the emotions from the questions hindi yun na makikita during the interview. Hindi mo rin may express kung ikaw yung recruiter. Hindi rin makikita ng candidate mo if you are kung ano yung emotions mo. So yung AI will definitely be of help, but will not replace the recruiters. Those are some of the recruitment myths that I can think of. That can be debunked. Unless my co-panelists have inputs. If none, then we can move to the next set of questions. For labor relations, is it okay to file an overtime pay even if we are already back to operation? Reduced work day, yet our employer asking to work on without pay. And if we report to work on a time off day, our boss asking us to offset it, yet we are still working at home. Parang tatlong questions in one go. Good luck, Attorney Linus.
Basically, yes, you can file for overtime pay. There's no suspension of the minimum labor standards, even during these times. So if you work more than 8 hours a day, then you should be rightfully compensated with overtime pay. So that would include working during your time off and or weekends if you exceeded the number of if you exceeded 40 hours for the week.
Can I comment on that?
Go ahead, Miss Marisa.
Yes,
Yeah, because we do a lot of work from home. And we have declared it as a policy that during the weekdays, at least during the weekdays, then there is no overtime because there's no way of checking whether they did overtime or not. I mean, you can be there working, but half the time, you cook, you sleep, you do other things, di ba? So then we say no overtime during you have deliverables. They're defined deliverables at the start of the work from home, and you do it within those 8 hours. No charging of overtime. Maybe it's a different banana if the work is on a weekend. Because obviously it's a weekend. It's not, or maybe there was a reason for that person to be asked to do something on a weekend. Maybe at that point you can charge overtime for that, but not during regular day.
yes. If you cannot supervise or quantify the work at home, then naturally you're considered like a field worker. Then there's no overtime.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
Miss Beth, nakamute po kayo. You'd like to share something?
And am I still on mute? Okay.
You're good
I
now.
wanted to ask. I'm okay now. I wanted to ask, is this related to telecommuting? Can this question be related to telecommuting law?
Attorney Linus?
Kasi telecommuting could really be where you're working from home or your compressed work week, no? Can this be related to a telecommuting, ano? Because in telecommuting,
Yes.
you're still allowed to go overtime, right?
Yes, the parameter should be set by the employer and employee on how to measure the work being done during telecommuting.
Okay. But for as long as it's agreed,
Yes.
agreed, then it's okay.
Actually,
Okay.
there are several apps that you can monitor the employee working from home, like in Microsoft Teams or Zoho People.
Mm.
There's a virtual logging in of employees to check their availability whenever you want to call them or contact them.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
So in that situation, I think you can demand overtime pay if you work more than 8 hours a day,
Mhm.
since your work would have been easily tracked by your employer.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that answer, Attorney Linus. Let's proceed to the next one. How do we enlighten the management about the importance of labor union? What are the basics of creating a union?
How do we enlighten? Well, as said before, there should be a dialogue between the employer and employees. That's the ideal. So regarding the basics of creating a union, you have to gather at least 20% of the employees to join your union and craft your constitution and bylaws and register it with DOLE. There's a workflow or a chart in the Department of Labor where we can follow, submit the application forms, and from there you can register your union if you have sufficient number. It's found in Department Order number 40-03.
40-03. Okay. So thank you for that. Let's move to the next. Thank you, Attorney Linus. Next set of questions, please. So compensation and benefits. Are there cost-efficient incentives for employees?
Cost efficient. Yes. Okay. Cost efficient. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fine. We can hear you.
Yes, we can
hear
Okay.
you.
Okay. Cost efficient incentives. Yeah, I guess in the light of this pandemic and the business condition, if you want to do something, then it has to be cost efficient. No? So there are actually different kinds of incentives. I could classify them as formal and informal. So the formal incentives are, of course, your merit increases, but that is expensive, and that gets into a base pay increase, which you cannot take away. So not all companies would do a regular merit increase program. Or productivity bonuses, which is good because it's a variable bonus depending on whether the company made money or not. Or again, depending on the contribution of the company to for the performance, no? Both the performance of the employee and of the company. And of course, you have the sales incentives for people that are on sales. Now let's talk about cost efficient incentives. Uh, well, maybe you can think of things like, productivity points, and that they would get, like if they meet their quota or they go beyond their quota, they get the certain points, or to make sure that they meet the manufacturing requirements. I know we used to do this in Intel. So we they would get certain points, and at the end of the period they can exchange yung para bang sa toy store, yung mga toy thing, that there are appliances there and they can redeem points to get these particular items that they want. That's cost efficient because again, it does not go to the base pay, no? Maybe you look at other recognition programs that you can do. Maybe ano ba to, like travel. Before, incentives can be you send them out, you send them and the loved one to go to Hong Kong, 'di ba? Yung mga ganyan, mga travel benefits, but that is not possible now. So maybe lump sum increases that you can do, basta anything that does not add to the base pay. You can be as creative as you want. Or maybe it can just be like a pat on the back. Ayan ang pinaka cost effective. The person did something really well, did a project, and did it so well. You're so impressed by that, you just have to go to that person and immediately give that recognition, a pat on the back. That is that's free, remember. So when I started in compensation, I was, very young, right after college. And I was, because my field is compensation, I was a fairly junior compensation person, and I was asked to do a project on compensation, on a rewards management project that was sent to the president, who is an expat. And I recall that he sent back that proposal with a smiley face. And I can never forget that. So see, it's free, yet that motivated me to do good in what I'm doing because of that small smiley face. And it is free. So many ways of being creative with respect to incentives. Would others like to comment or add on to what I said?
I think we're all good po. We can move to your next question po para sa inyo. May I know if tax shield is recognized as a de minimis benefit?
Benefit. Tax shield. Oh, I'm not so familiar with tax shields, but for me as an HR practitioner and coming from a multinational company, give Caesar what is due Caesar. In other words, let's pay the correct taxes. So especially now, di ba, the coffers of the Philippines is already been, they spent billions of pesos for this pandemic. Maybe it's about time that we pay the right taxes. But if, for example, you want to help the employees naman, so now they say, wala bang tax shield, ganyan. I think what is important is to make sure that it is legal. I mean, work with your finance department kasi they're the ones that files taxes. what are the things that can be done to make it, tax shield and legal. Yung legality is very important. So now on the question of whether is this a de minimis benefit, I don't think it is. It's not even included as part of the list of de minimis benefits. Companies that are doing tax shields are quite quiet about it. It's not something that you brag about, no. Okay, I'm done.
All right. Thank you. For L&D, what L&D topics should people in HR attend these days, both entry level and officer level?
Right. If I may say, there is so much learning that we need to engage in nowadays because we're dealing with new situations. I was going to say all that are available, attenda natin as learning and the practitioners. I mean, earlier, PMAP showed the lineup of the topics that are being offered through our PMAP webinars. As much as possible, I believe learning and development people should attend and engage in in these different topics, whether or not it's part of your function or not. In HR, you may be in L&D, or you may be in compensation, or you may be in employee engagement. It's always helpful to broaden your knowledge and to absorb what the other functions would be doing, whether at the entry level or officer level. Well, definitely the most critical topics that all HR people should attend right now would be those that are related to managing our workforce during this crisis, because that's the most relevant. But let us not focus all our energies and resources simply into responding to the crisis, because life goes on. When you talk about business continuity, business recovery, all the other topics that are normally part of a development plan, they still are relevant. So I would say continue to develop skills on the technical side, how to design a job evaluation program, or how to conduct a training needs analysis, presentation skills. All of this build into our skills, whether entry level or officer level. Now, for the officer levels, critical again at this time, if I would reiterate, would be communicating during a crisis, leading change, being able to be a change catalyst. These again are critical, but let us not limit ourselves to these areas. On the matter of tenure of an employee as a basis for choosing who to undergo training, this question bothers me a little bit. I'd like to understand better the context. The way I understand the question, some companies think of training not really so much as developing new skills or based on the need of the individual for development, but sometimes training is viewed as a reward, a recognition. That's why tenure becomes a factor. Because otherwise, in terms of choosing who to undergo training, it should be based on the training needs analysis, the performance requirements, the individual development plan of that employee, wherein tenure does not come into the discussion. So I hope tenure is not the primary factor. The only scenario where I can imagine tenure will come in, and I don't think it will happen, it's too unique that you will have two employees with the same set of skills, in the same role, with the same level of competencies, the same individual development plan, and therefore there was only one training opportunity. And that's where tenure might be considered. But that's not going to happen, right? Because we're dealing with unique people. So people will have different competency development needs, would have different individual development plans. And whether you are a tenured or a new employee, you need to be given that opportunity to engage in training.
Thank you, VP Lynn. Meron pa gusto mag-add from the panelists?
You know, if you
Go
if
ahead,
you
Ms.
look
Melissa.
at if you look at training, who are the employees that needs to undergo training? So obviously, those that are new because they have to
Yeah.
learn what they're supposed to do. At the other side, then you say, sayang naman, we're gonna spend so much on training, yet they're not even regular employees yet. So this is where the tenure aspect comes into play, di ba? They're not even regular employees yet. What if you spend so much for training and yet they leave you or they don't meet the performance standards to become a regular employee. So I think you need to balance this. Or depends on the training, di ba? Kasi if it is a very expensive training, like you have a new technician, you have to send the technician abroad for training, pero kailangan niya even if he's still a probationary employee to be able to do the job. That is where the training bond comes in. Doon na lang natin ipasok yung kung kailangan mag-bond o hindi.
Mhm.
But obviously, tenure should not have it depends on who needs it most to be
Mhm.
able to do their job well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Ako, if I may just share, our practice here in the office. When I was new in the organization, I joined in March 2018. First thing I've asked my president was, will the trainings be bonded? Sabi niya, no, because we are we should we should cultivate learning as a way of as part of our culture, a way of learning, a way of innovating. That needs to be our go-to strategy. So if we have to send our people for training, we send them. Uh, uh, Sabi niya, kikitain din natin yan. Don't worry. So let's move to the next, to OD. Our questions for Ms. Beth. How does organization development affect the current practice of the company? And the second question is, how can HR innovate an organization to fully integrate gender and development initiatives, most especially women participation? Interesting. Go ahead, Ms. Beth. Ms. Beth, naka-mute po kayo.
Right. I don't know exactly what you mean by how does org affect the current practice of the company. If I would probably interpret this as because of the COVID, how does OD affect the current practice given the OD situation? I'll answer it through that, no, Mark, if you
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
mind,
Go
because
ahead.
I don't know exactly what the person meant on the current practice of the company. You know, OD plays a lot of. It's very important now that you use this functionality in during these times, no, where there's a lot of. Anxiety. There's a lot of apprehension, there's a lot of uncertainty, no, because OD can, as I mentioned earlier, OD can really transform itself into several. In fact, it even covers learning and development, no, because your OD is really providing you interventions that can actually make your organization more high performing, and it's very difficult to put your organization into high performing mode, especially when people are really affected by this situation today. You know, one thing that you can actually do is really to do a lot of survey. You can do pulse survey. You can use the Google uh, um, Survey Monkey to be able to come up with mini surveys or pulse surveys that will actually help you determine what is actually hurting the organization today, especially so your employees. No, and I think your OD intervention, once you have that, which is a pulse survey, no, in looking at organizational health, will help you lead to another OD intervention, which is probably the dialogues, no, or the communication aspect, no, and then it will lead you to another kind of OD intervention, which is looking after the engagement of employees, no. So and also in terms of the business side, it can the pulse survey can allow you to use OD to probably reconstruct or change the way you're actually operating today. No? Because whenever there's an organizational change, no, any change that you put in a business will actually require change management. And the change management is really an intervention tool in OD. No? So I think OD really impacts the current practice that is being done today in the company. And even if it's not COVID, no, every time you make a change, no, even in your teams, you will have to do OD as well because you have to recreate your team. And there's another model on team formation. I just forgot the name of that, but your team, every time there's a change, goes through that progression of storming, no, where people don't know what to do, and then later on they agree, which is the norming, and then they go into the performing stage, when norms are already created, and that's OD altogether. So I hope that I answered that particular question on how OD siguro not affect but impacts, on the current practices today. And that could probably be the question. And then the next question would really be how HR innovate an OD, an organization to fully integrate gender and development initiatives, most especially women participation. I guess again, coming from, you need to have a data to tell you how to really navigate your organization to really make it more inclusive, no, and to allow some form of diversity. No? And you use that data, no, the data that you will generate from a survey or the data that you can generate from your HR information system will allow you to do more will allow you to create intervention that will address um, diversity and inclusion in the workplace. No? One of the things that we're doing today is really looking at women participation. In fact, one of the things that you can also use is really creating key performance indicators of whether you are if you in case you decide to practice diversity and inclusion in the workplace, no, you can actually create what categories do you want to focus on, what categories do you want to focus on in that diversity and inclusion, and then you can create KPIs for that. For example, if you're talking about women participation, then you can probably track how many women managers do we have today in the organization. Um, versus the total number of managers or leaders that you have. So you can track women versus the total number of leaders, women technical or expert versus the number of total experts that you have in the organization. Then you can also create um, conversations that will actually allow women to have a voice. No? In fact, that's exactly what we're doing today in my own organization, because when we actually did our employee engagement survey last year, one of the focus areas that we wanted to manage is really the voice of the women, because they're saying that um, because it's a male dominated organization because we produced energy. Okay, so they were saying that they want to have a voice in the organization. So what we've done as part of our intervention is to create a women's pool, a team that will actually focus on women's activities. So what we do, we invite speakers who are women, not only on the soft side, but actually more on the technical side, to bring about that change and the challenge among the women. Then we created a women's community where they can have a venue by which they can share their ideas. Now we give them topics or themes that will allow them to create that to create their opinion and insight. No? So it's really bringing about thought leadership among the women. No? And you can do this not only among women, but you can also do this among PWDs or other sectors that you want to focus on. So I think it all starts with data, and your data can come in from your information system, or it can also come in if you wanted to do a survey so that you know exactly what to focus on. In fact, that's the one thing I like about organizational development. You don't do any initiative without any data. You just can't come up with any intervention or any program for that matter without relying on what does the data tell you. Okay, because the data is very important to really focus exactly on what kind of learning that you have to come up with in your organization, what kind of talent development that you want in your organization, what kind of rewards that you wanted to do, because even rewards can be focused, or even rewards can be differentiated, even learning can be differentiated. No? So I think OD is so encompassing that you can use it in any functional HR function that you wanted to pursue. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Miss Beth. Thank you, Miss Beth. Tama yun eh. I was once told you cannot just come up with something out of a whim. You need to have data. Data is important. So that ends our fourth cycle. Let's move to the next.
Mhm.
Okay, questions for recruitment. What safety net should be adopted if assessment tests are done online? Confidentiality leakage. And what will be the new normal in recruitment, at least in the next 3 to 5 years? Okay, for the first question, the safety net with regard to confidentiality, if you will be entertaining personal data, definitely you have to have, you need to have, you need to adapt to the Data Privacy Act. No, dapat meron dong not disclaimer, but a note that you are going to use the data only for the purpose of testing,
Mhm.
and that this will be, if they can actually, if they want to request for it, you can give it back to the candidate. Even the CV, by the way, can be returned to the candidate if they wish to have it back. And on our end, we cannot. We have to have the CV shredded in case that the candidate will not be chosen. So as to safeguard their data, or their personal details. With in relation to leakage, kapag ka yung online test, somehow it is an open book type of test. So unless it is really parang designed for a specific function that you have built, hindi masyado mahihirapan for you to have leakage. But if this are a set of questions na possible, na available online, we really cannot prevent people from using or doing it online. Although there are companies that uh, do this kind of online testing. May mga companies that you can partner with. So if you wish to avoid and you want to have safety nets on your recruitment process, specifically on online testing, I would suggest that you partner with a professional team to do that. What will be the new normal? Well, again, before the pandemic, we've started. Most of us started using social media platforms to be part of our recruitment tool. Andyan ang LinkedIn, we do cold calling already. Even Facebook are being utilized.
Mhm.
Yes. Some of us have created chatbots using Facebook. So yun yung mga trends even prior to the COVID pandemic na nagagamit na natin, and it's very efficient. And then I think what we need to look into lang, whether we are going to use a paid platforms or paid process to nagagamitin natin. Think of your candidates as your customers. How do you want your customers to be treated? Treat them the same way. Why?
Mhm.
Because our candidates, if they weren't chosen, they can still talk about to other people how their experience was. So important po that we provide the candidate experience.
Mhm.
So even from the interview, we have to provide meaningful feedback,
Mhm.
those things. Treat them as our customers. Yun po ang pinaka-importante. Not just part of new normal, but really part of HR practice that we have to do, being transparent to them.
Mhm.
Recruitment will be more tech-based. Again, there will be a lot of online platforms to choose from.
Mhm.
The challenge lang nito will be internet infrastructure, internet connection. But then again, hopefully this will be resolved,
Mhm.
and those will be the new thing, or the ongoing thing, the next 3 to 5 years. More tech-based, more chatbots. But again, uh, improve lang natin as HR practitioners the candidate experience
Mhm.
until they are onboarded.
Yeah. If I may add, Mark, one
Go
of the
ahead, Miss
things
Beth.
that you
Thank you.
one of the things that you can probably do that we're also trying to explore is we're
Mhm.
asking employees to submit their to talk about themselves in a video, because you can actually record yourself already, right? And then you
Correct.
can provide them with the top 3 questions that they can actually talk about, so that you can more or less find out, one is how they communicate, second is how they actually project themselves, no, in an interview, and then third is their thought process, no, because you will be able to ask them some questions that can um, help you understand what milestones they have done in their own organizations, what achievements they have done, and um, what they value most. No? So these are some of the things that we're trying to explore, where the applicant now can actually submit his own video, and I'm sure this is something that will be really exciting, especially with the younger folks.
Looks like it. Looks like it, Miss Beth. I think I will try to adapt that one.
Mm-mm.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Let's move to the next set of questions for labor relations. By the way, Attorney Linus being so
Yes.
benevolent, he's answering questions even dun sa chat room. Thank you, Attorney Linus. We have two
No problem.
questions here. How to legally terminate a problem employee? A second is it legal for management to cut the salaries of the employees to live with the losses or financial problems of the company? I guess during this time, pandemic.
Okay, the first question is not only applicable this time, but anytime. So, how to legally terminate a problem employee? So, not only for a problem employee, but for all employees, there should be a just cause. And a just cause is specified. It's either a serious misconduct, gross habitual neglect of duties, fraud, deliberate breach of trust, commission of serious crime, and other similar causes. So, besides the just cause, it must be so severe that it would uh, require termination. So, sometimes for those just causes, it will only lead to suspension, even a reprimand. So, uh, we have to make sure also that it's not committed habitually. So, if it's a first time offense, naturally you cannot immediately terminate the employee. Besides those substantial due process requirement of the labor code, we have to provide the procedural due process. We have to notify first the employee of what are the charges against him,
Mm-mm.
and he has the opportunity to respond to those charges. It's either a hearing or a written explanation. And after some time, there must be a decision from the management to explain to why they come to this decision, and if there's a penalty involved or not. So those are the legal ways to terminate the problem employee. Do you wish to add questions regarding this topic?
Wala pa naman so far. Anyone who would like to pitch in?
Um,
Miss Marisa, go ahead.
Okay, yes. Now that we are having this pandemic, diba, one of the things that we can do is to do a temporary retrenchment. Kasi what is good with temporary retrenchment is that at this time, you will not pay yet the separation pay because diba, you don't have money this time. But also it gives you the flexibility of hiring back that employee should business improves. But of course, you need to do that within a 6-month period, right, attorney? So
Yes.
when we did this for one of the companies I work with, we have decided that in the selection of who to be temporarily retrenched, then we will not use LIFO, but we will use performance as a basis. Kasi parang pagkakataon eh. You know how hard it is to terminate a problem employee. I mean, you have to show that there is the performance expectations are clear, that there is corrective action plans documented. Parang the burden of the termination rests on the employer. And if you don't have all of those documentation, it will really be hard to terminate a problem employee. However, we see that in this situation, parang Dole is parang more open about it. Plus, we are using this pandemic to our advantage. Kasi dito natin ipapasok na yung mga problem employees, isama na natin for temporary retrenchment. So that's what we're doing. I'm done.
Thank you, Miss Marisa. We can now move to the next set of questions. Actually, you want to?
There's another question.
Sorry.
I haven't answered.
Sorry.
The second question was, is it legal for management to cut salaries? The answer is yes, but the employee must agree to that. Not only that, we can also be creative. Like I have one of my clients who not really cut the salary, but just held on to it. They're just holding it until I think January next year. They would release it.
Yeah.
So also the employees can also agree that to suspend the increases. They're supposed to receive the increases in salary as per their CBA this year, so they can hold it out or suspend it. So as long as it helps the employer or the company to survive, these employees are agreeing to this salary or wage reduction, or even temporary reduction of salary. So again, it must be in writing, agreed by both employer and employee, maximum of 6 months only, and the paperwork should be submitted to the employee.
And if I may add, Attorney Linus, in the merit increases, instead of giving the increases on monthly basis, because this is going to be a recurring cost, you may probably opt to do a lump sum. Give the amount, those increases, lump it up to 12 months. So in effect, it becomes it's given to you in a lump sum amount because you probably might need it during this time, but it doesn't add on your pay, because the pay will actually have pay-related impact on other things. So that's another option that you can probably
Yes.
look at
If you are liquid enough. Yes.
Yeah, if the company can afford, and with agreements with the employee.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, talking about reduction in salaries, I'd like to share what we're doing for work from home employees versus employees that are required to go to work. Because di ba now, starting June, parang we would like our employees to go to work. However, there is a transportation problem, di ba? So for critical employees, we even have to make transportation arrangements for them. And some of them would take the effort of going to work. I mean, spending, dati raw they only spend 50 pesos, 100 pesos, go to and from work. Now they have to spend more. Mas mahal ang tricycle, di ba? Mas mahal yung because of all of this social distancing. So, and they have to wake up earlier, parang, and then there is that fear of COVID, di ba? Being exposed. So parang there is so much at risk and additional cost for employees to go to work. And then, but we have people that are on work from home. So then the employee said, hindi ba, that's not fair, di ba? Parang sila work from home, then they don't have to go through everything that we're going through because they're just there at home. So then I realized that maybe there has to be a differentiation. So what I did was, if you are work from home, you have an option, di ba? Like if we ask you to come back to work, you have the option of doing work from home or going to the office. But if you are work from home, then you will only be paid 80%. So meaning there's a 20% pay cut to make it balance, di ba? So that it's fair for those that are working. However, of course, we made sure that we are legally protected. There's that disclaimer, there's that agreement, etc., etc. Okay, so and by the way, even with that 20% reduction, employees would still opt to have that reduction rather than taking the risk of going to office. So everyone happy, right?
Yeah, win-win solution.
Yes,
Yes,
it's-
yes.
Yeah.
Fair lang. Tsaka fair, di ba?
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for your answers. We move to learning and development questions. Sorry, compensation and benefits. For Ms. Marisa po, what are the possible benefits the company can give to an employee whose employment is to be terminated due to illness? And how can we assess who is worthy for a higher pay? Those with experience, awards, or workload? Is it even possible to request for higher salary amidst this pandemic? Go ahead, Ms. Marisa. Ms. Marisa, naka-mute po kayo.
Okay, answering number one, di ba I mentioned earlier the 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 separation law, where it says that you can terminate an employee for illness, di ba, of 6 months. So therefore, they are entitled to that 1/2 month per year of service. So at least they get something. No? In addition to that, maybe we can look at yung HMO extension. I would say maybe the HMO extension, or some companies are even more generous, no? So I do not know whether they report this to their HMO provider, but they would even enroll them for 1 more year. So in addition to the period, parang to complete the year where the HMO was already paid. In addition to that, because they really want to help that employee and they know that that employee cannot go back to work anymore in any company, what they do is they further protect them by giving them another year of an HMO benefit. So that's my input there. Are there additions so that I could go to the next question? Wala na. Okay.
Go ahead, ma'am.
We all want to go now. So the second one is, how can we assess who's worthy of a higher pay? Those with experience, workload, awards. That's the first question. Second is it even possible to request for a higher salary during this pandemic? So maybe I'd answer the last question, which is it even possible to request for a higher salary amidst this pandemic. So we know that there is a problem financially of all of the companies. So I don't think this is the right time to be very complainer about having increase in pay, except where you have all of your performance management systems in place. So, for example, nga, you have a performance evaluation, and there's supposed to be an increase, etc., etc. So then you would have to go through that. Okay. But if there is none, then so be it, no? I mean, just be happy that you have a job. Now, on the question of who is worthy to get a higher pay, to me, there are three things that I look at. Of course, number one is performance, no? So you have to, while uh, maybe we can start with competency. You have to have the right competencies for the job. However, I don't want to pay for competencies because a competency would make you better in your job to perform well. Diba? That is your means to be able to perform well. To a company, what is important is the performance, not really the competency. So then you have to look at both. And then the third one that I would also add is the concept of criticality. I mean, there are certain jobs that are very critical, hard to find position. These are the only people that knows that job. If not, parang if you think about it and you do ranking and rating, and everyone is good, then you say, who is the best amongst them? Then you think of, sino ba dito that I cannot survive without this person because the work that he's doing is very critical to the organization. So that we add that also as a criteria to determine who is from a ranking and rating point of view. I mean, who is the best amongst the best. Okay.
Mark, if
And
I
what
may
of the-
add,
Yes, go ahead, Miss Beth.
I think there's only one criteria for that to assess who's worthy of a higher pay, the one who brings in the results. Because at the end of the day, it's the results that matters.
Correct.
So if you're bringing in more to your organization, then probably you're worthy to have a higher pay because you're contributing more to the organization. I think that's the one that
Yes,
matters most.
and
Correct.
and the important thing then is the retention, di ba? I mean, you have to retain them. By the way, kunyari ito, pandemic, you have very low budget. I mean, you're not financially okay. Then maybe this is the time to to look at whom do you want to take care of, the employees. Kasi baka mamaya, this is, although you say, wala naman ibang trabaho elsewhere, but then if they have the necessary competencies, they're good, they can present themselves even through, virtual interviews, they might get a job elsewhere and you need them. So maybe limit, I mean, if you have a small pot of money, give it all to the one that is critical to your organization. Don't spread it equally amongst everyone.
Yeah, agree. I will take it from both of yours input. I-share ko lang ito. We really have before we even give increments, dapat meron tayong parameters to use. Tama yung banggit ni Miss Beth. The people who brings in the money should be well compensated. So if let's say your KPI is you have to hit 100% of your KPI, you did 100% of your KPI. I think that is actually being paid already by the company through your salary. But if you exceed to that 100%, if you've done enough or you've done more than that, you added value to the organization, only then that you should be given an extra. So that's my take.
Yes, that is, I teach performance management. That's always one problem with the Filipinos. Kasi we are so, we're not like the Americans, di ba? I will tell you exactly how you perform. Tayo mga Filipinos, very, tayo caring. Parang if the person is doing naman the job, and then the KPIs are met 100%, ganyan, dapat ang rating nun dapat meets, di ba? Or average kasi they met the requirements of the job, which is the 100% KPI. So you cannot give them above average or outstanding.
Correct.
By experience in the Filipino organization, pag ganyan, bibigyan na nila ng above average or outstanding. Ganyan tayo eh. That is why, di ba, some companies, especially in the US, they have talked about performance distribution that will, and you're comparing one versus the other, and only select talaga, I mean, amongst everyone that is probably good, who is the top 10. And that is where we use the criteria of performance, competency, and criticality. So yun, tama si Mark na they do their job, 100% KPI, then they get a meets rating or the average rating. If you want to give more, then you have to do more. I mean, they should be hitting the targets of the roof, no?
Thank you, Ms. Marisa. Thank you, Ms. Beth. We now move to the next set of questions for learning and development.
Right.
Is there a
Okay.
short...
Yeah.
go ahead. VP Lin,
In
go
the
ahead.
interest of time, I'm mindful. There's so many fantastic questions that have come in, but it's now 4:40. So
4:40.
yeah, I'll move a little faster. Is there a shortcut to develop a truly comprehensive L&D program for employees? The word shortcut doesn't quite match with the words truly comprehensive, right? If you look at this question, when you say truly comprehensive, it means you go through the process diligently of looking at business needs, linking it with role competency requirements, and then looking at individual development plans to come up with your comprehensive learning and development program. How do you shortcut this, right? The temptation is to just focus on individual development plans. That might be a shortcut, but it could fail to capture the needs that you need to address based on the role competency. So is there a shortcut? I would rather recommend don't take shortcuts because then you don't accomplish your truly comprehensive L&D program. What are the ideal topics in conducting our own webinars for behavioral training, and how long should webinars be conducted? Let me take the second point first. How long should webinars be conducted? Ideally, maximum of half a day. Like the session today is pretty long already. People's attention span are short, and it's only so much information that people can absorb at the same time. If you can cut it up, since anyway you're conducting it internally, into 1 hour sessions, again, those are the learning bites, micro learning sessions that I mentioned. People will then focus on one segment, one topic at a time, and then build on it. So each day there's a chance for them to integrate and absorb what they have learned so that they can think of application points as well. Ideal topics to conduct your own webinars. That goes back to your training needs analysis. Prioritize those that are critical and are needed by a majority of your employees. In FINMA, what we did is to take a look based on FGD and results of their individual development plans, results of the performance management reviews from the prior year, and looked at what do they need, and then merge it now with the COVID pandemic. We know that people need topics on stress management, maintaining wellness, how to conduct online meetings, professional presence. So the topics would be ideally suited to your specific needs in your organization.
Thank you, VP Lin. Let's move to the next two questions for Ms. Beth. What employee engagement program should the company implement during this time? And what's the best tool to determine employees' level of agility and resilience? Ms. Beth? Nawala si Miss Beth.
Sir Mark?
Hi.
Yes po. Sir, nagka-problem lang po sa internet si Miss Beth. Proceed muna po tayo sa next question.
Sige.
Okay po.
Sige. Ano yung next question natin? Sige. After this, then we'll head back to Miss Beth. Hopefully she'll be able to come back. What assessment tools should be adopted to gauge applicants' competencies in this time of COVID-19? Again, this will be depending on the job that or the function of the person. Okay, Miss
Hello?
Miss Beth is back. Miss Beth is back.
Oh,
Can
I'm
we?
sorry.
No, it's alright.
I was out.
No. It's alright. We're moving back to the questions for you.
Okay. I thought that I was
Ishi?
answering the question already.
Oo, nawala po kayo sandali. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Opo.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was telling the employee engagement program that you should probably implement is really do a lot of communication. No? The communication does not only refer to having dialogues with employees, but one effective one is having your president or your COO or your general manager or the owner of the company to write letters to the employees and then send it through the emails, no? And give them a status of where is the business, what challenges are you facing, so that the employee will be aligned with the company, no, in terms of also feeling the same kind of challenges that they have, no, as owners or as president of the organization. Another one would really be you can have leader series. No? A leader series would be what is finance doing? What is HR doing? What is your operations doing? So it's giving them information so that they will be in the same page as the rest of the people in the organization. So I think I think that's one of the things that you should really work on, no, as part of the engagement program, and have an opportunity for them to have a voice to be able to suggest. No? Another one would really be having common understanding. So you have to come up with quick news or information that tells you about how are different employees doing during times of crisis. What you can do is you can even ask them to send photos to you of how they're coping, or you can do pulse survey just to find out how they are, no? And what are the challenges that they're actually encountering during during this time. And what's the best tool to determine employees' level of agility and resilience? It's really how they deliver work, no? Because agility is how are you really coping fast, no? So if you have an employee, given our situation today, who suggests who has that positive spirit, who's able to blend himself or herself into the situation, I think is a good proof of agility and resilience. No? Resilience is being able to bounce back, especially so in a critical situation like what we're experiencing today. So best tool is to really ask or to observe, no? Because as I mentioned to you, sometimes employees are saying this, but actually that's not what they meant. No? Or you can see it in results also, because if the employee is still churning out productivity and results for the organization, which means that he is able to cope given even with the unstructured situation. So that's it for me, Mark. Thank you. Mark, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Nakalimutan ko yung sarili ko na i-unmute. Magandang hapon po ulit. Okay, I think we've run out of time to answer more questions sent to us by our viewers. But then again, I'd like to thank everyone for sending their questions to us and being online for this 4-hour stretch since 1 p.m. But before I let go of our panelists, I'd like to ask each of them to perhaps say their parting words. We'll start off with Attorney Linus. Any parting words, Attorney Linus?
Well, thank you for having me. It's my first time to participate in your, what do you call it, webinar or your virtual seminar. Hope to see you soon again, and I'm glad to help.
Yes, I think we will be having more of Attorney Linus soon. Let's have Miss Marisa. Miss Marisa, parting words po, please.
Okay, so anyway, I'd like to thank PMUP for giving us this opportunity. And, you know, as a sharer, it's not just sharing, but we also learn from the experiences of the other facilitators. So to me, I was taking notes left and right. No, I'm not here just as sharer, but also as a participant. So if there is one thing that I can say to the HR practitioners there, is the importance of balancing, uh, you know, our role to help our employees. Because HR is not really just employees, but also to balance this with the business. You need to create or strike that balance between helping the employees while at the same time also helping the business. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Marisa. Let's move to Miss Beth. Miss Beth? Nakamute
Thank
po kayo.
you.
Yeah.
Ay, okay na ako?
Yes,
Hindi na ako
ma'am.
nakamute? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Pima, for inviting me again in this forum. It's very good to share, especially so during these times, because as you know, as Lynn has mentioned, I think this is an opportunity for all of us to pay it forward also. No? And similar to Marisa, I'm also learning. No? I learned from Attorney Linus. I again learned from Lynn and Marisa, and of course you, Mark, no? Because and that's how we grow the network. No? And you know, the situation actually brings us two things: challenges and opportunities. No, of course, the challenges sanay tayo dyan sa HR. I think we eat challenges for breakfast, as they say, because even if it's in a normal situation, we will always have challenges and problems. No? And our problems are kind of difficult, no? Because our problems sometimes are ambiguous, versus those that are in operation where it's really, you can see, and there's and it's easy to draw the line. No? But here in HR, you always have to balance things. No? And I think what is important for us is to always look at the positive side of things. No? To always look at what is it that we can do, no, for us to be able to overcome whatever unstructured situation we're in today, no, and always keep that positivity in us, because you know every challenge has a solution. Of course, not all solutions are good, but if your solution is good, it turns out to be good, then celebrate tayo. Pero if it's not, then let's do a reflection and life goes on. So maraming salamat again for PIMA for inviting us here. And I really am very happy to be sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Beth. Now we move to VP Lynn. VP Lynn. Nakabit po kayo, ma'am. Miss Lynn,
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone, for being part of the session today. And it's really a learning opportunity for all of us. I'd like to thank the panelists for giving your time and expertise to come. And when I say it's a learning opportunity for all of us, this crisis can be a way for us to implement a 70-20-10 development framework for HR leaders, for our employees. I wanted to show this as my last slide because somebody asked earlier on the questions, what are the best ways and most effective ways by which we could continue to learn and develop our people during this time? the 70-20-10 development framework shows that it's not only through formal learning. People were asking also in the chat earlier, paano yan, mas effective ba itong mga webinars versus the traditional mode? You know what? These sessions wherein we learn formally can just be, a portion of the time that we allocate for developing our people. Webinar sharing sessions like this can also be taken as part of the 20%. In a way, we are mentoring, coaching, we're exposing you to a larger network, helping you to expand your mindset. This is also what we can do for our employees. We are constrained right now by our budgets to provide formal training, but we can give more coaching opportunities, more mentoring opportunities. And 70% of development really happens on the job. Seriously. A lot of people say, sinasabi nyo lang yan. But it's true. We learn as we cope with various situations, and we can take on this as an opportunity to take stretch assignments, be part of a task force, a committee, undertake project leadership. Kung mayroong nagkakasakit sa ibang units and functions, we could take a cross-functional assignment. All of this will broaden our competencies. And we find that in the midst of this crisis, we grow. We grow as leaders. We discover talents that perhaps in the past we didn't know that we knew. We find our strengths, and we will find that we can make a difference. So I want to encourage everyone, take this crisis and make yourselves unstoppable. The crisis cannot stop us from learning, from growing, and from sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, VP Lynn. Again, we'd like to thank you, all the attendees of this Project Share. You know that this Project Share started in 2015 and was spearheaded by our past president, our very own past president, Obed Policarpio. This is really a good tool to reach out to MSMEs, and I hope that there will be more of this soon. And I'd like to announce lang that our digital summit will be happening on July 29 and 30. Ish, could you share the slide of that announcement? There you go. So those who haven't registered, you still have time. And those who would like to sponsor or can encourage other companies to sponsor, you have the details here. So join us on our second PMAP Digital Summit on 29th and 30th of July, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Preserving and generating employment for the Filipino people with 2 exciting days of plenary discussions. So if you join us today, definitely you will be hearing and learning more on the 29th and on the 30th. So join and register now. So maraming again salamat for PMAP for inviting me as one of the panelists and giving me the opportunity to be the moderator as well. Thank you, Edie Rene, for the opportunity. And that's it. Marami pong salamat. Magandang hapon, everyone. And I hope you all learned, because I learned as well from my co-panelists. Kamsahamnida po. Bye.
Thank you, Miss Beth. Thank you, Sir Mark. Thank you, Attorney Linus. Thank you, Miss Gurley. And thank you, VP Lynn.
Ish.